Hey everyone, welcome to the seventh episode of the MJL. I'm your host, Mike Lee, and I interview my everyday friends who have unconventional talents, experiences, and hobbies. Today I have Christine Lu, who is the owner of Tiny Namaste Pottery. She has her own private therapy practice and is a certified yogi. We met each other during college on a Japan trip, a study abroad Japan trip, in college, and basically our friendship and our friend group has never really looked back. I think we've probably been friends for about at least a good 15 years, I want to say. It's a pretty big milestone. So, Christine, I want to welcome you to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Hi. Like Mike said, I'm Christine Lu. I'm based in Southern California. I'm a ceramicist. I do my private practice for therapy for mental health, yoga certified instructor, so many other things, social worker, dog mom, list goes on.
Awesome. So, basically, for me, like, there's a lot of things that actually have been happening in my life, and also as well as yours. Like, you just came back from Burning Man, what, maybe like 2 weeks ago or something like that?
Yep.
Okay, we can definitely talk about that, in a little bit. Um, Trying to think on my end, right? Like, one, I just picked up a Model Y, Tesla Model Y. I was basically waiting for about like 9 months or so, and like the process for that, I really wasn't thinking about it over the 9 months that often. But when it came time to actually pick it up, surprisingly, it all happened like really fast, like within 1 to 2 weeks. But
Wow.
yeah, the
Yeah,
car has
congrats.
been.
I saw it. It's really looks really nice.
Yeah, the reason why I decided to get it was because I thought it was going to be like a good family car, family doggy car for the future. Not that I'm like ready to have a family yet, like in the near future, as in like the next 1 to 2 years, but I know that in the maybe 3 to 5, that's something that I would love to like aspire to have. And I was thinking that it'd be a good family car kind of to have. Think about safety, think about if I want to get a dog, just that optionality is really good to have.
Hmm. Yeah, and then I guess on my end, I've had so many life changes this year alone. I guess in the past 3, 4 months alone, getting married, moving to a new city, to a new house, going on a 1 month backpacking trip in Southeast Asia, going to Burning Man, and just leaving my job to do ceramics full time.
Right.
Yeah, so many changes.
That's something I think like all these life changes, like they all have some sort of, inspiration, artist. I feel like they have some sort of like artistic inspiration behind them. So I do kind of want to take it back to, before, you decided to be a yogi or, a potter or, get into, a private therapy practice. Like talk to me about where your artistic side and nature had really grew and developed. Like how did that come to manifest itself?
It's been organic. I never really considered myself an artist until just a few years ago, maybe like a couple years after restarting ceramics, just on my own. But I've always been creative in the sense that I've loved to personalize everything I had, loved to experiment with style and fashion. And there was a point where I considered going to fashion school instead of grad school for social work. So just personalizing everything and having that creative touch to things has always been a part of me. And I mean, I express my creativity in so many other ways through, I mean, dressing Subi, like giving her more character, um, and just doing things like improv comedy or um, other different hobbies like soap making. So I've always been interested in being hands on or just express like my creativity, like verbally or writtenly, or just through like curating different styles of mine. But considering myself an artist, that is really new to me.
Got it. But I think an artist can manifest, or I guess creativity and artistic endeavors can manifest itself in different ways. Like you talked about fashion, right? As something that like you initially kind of gravitated towards. Like I believe like at one time, like you created like a Game Boy, like kind of
Mm-hmm.
dress and things like that. So like it seems like it's always kind of been there for the
Mm-hmm.
most part, but the creative expressions that used, right, to manifest itself just comes out probably in different ways, whether it's through, yoga or therapy or, pottery, right? Like they all
Right.
have different ways of expressing yourself, either through visual means or through a written word or through emotional means. That's kind of how I
Hmm.
sort of took it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just different outlets for creativity.
Okay, and you mentioned Subi, and so I want to get to like who is Subi, right? Like,
Oh,
um, it would be great to
Subi.
know like if you know how she has played an intricate role in your kind of artistic endeavors.
Well, I mean, she's plays a pretty big role in my life now. Ever since this is Subi, if you see it on YouTube, she is my baby pug. I've had her for about almost 4 years now, and she's just been such a joy and a light in my life. She brings out my like very limited extroversion. So she's helped me break out of my shell a lot in terms of
Got
just
it.
talking to people. Like when I bring Subi around, people love to pet her. They love to talk to her. And in turn, I have to talk back, or I have to like talk a little and converse with others. And she's just brought out a lot of me that I never knew I had in myself, like so much like love and care for another being, like a dog. I actually didn't like dogs for my whole life until
Like, what is
Subi.
it? What is it that you didn't initially like about dogs, right? What was your sort of fear or
Um,
aversion, right, to dogs?
it was just like a minor incident that I had when I was younger when a golden retriever, like nicest dog, just wanted to play but it ended up like jumping on me and I fell
Mm.
on the ground and it just I didn't like dogs after that. But
I
then
mean, it sounds like
I've
a very
always wanted a
traumatic
pug.
experience, like
Yeah.
from that instance. And the funny thing is, I know one of my mom's friends, like she also didn't really like dogs as well until one of her kids, or I think her son, ended up buying a dog for himself, and he like came over to the house, to her house, and was like, "Hey, mom, can you take care of it?" And at first, she was really scared, but then as she started to actually care and nurture for it, she actually became someone who became a dog lover from then on. So it kind of reminds me
Yeah.
of that sort of kind of story and experience.
Oh, totally. Like Subi has changed me and my personality completely. I think just being more like caring.
Got it. I mean, that sounds like something that dogs can really have that effect of withdrawing someone or extracting like the best parts of you, that you didn't necessarily know that you had, or just didn't have really a way to express it in a more kind of humanistic kind of way.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I really love her, and she's just so funny, funny. Like,
Do you feel like you get your thrill, like, because I know that maybe the fashion side of things, like, that's something that, maybe isn't as big of a focus in like your business practices per se. But do you feel like you get to kind of have that sort of fun with Subi in terms of like getting to express or put fashion onto her?
yeah, it's like a different kind of expression. It's more so like thinking like she'll look really cute and things, so I buy a lot of stuff. But
Mhm.
I also like to match with her, and she has also like really enjoyed putting on clothes. She just wags her tail whenever I put a new outfit on her, so it's really cute. So
Yeah,
it's a
I
win.
definitely can
Yeah,
imagine that. I
she's a
do
very
kind
spoiled girl.
I'm sure you spoil her a lot. I mean, she is right now your only child.
Yeah.
So, she's going to get the best from you. So I do want to kind of get into uh, more of the traveling that you've done as, maybe not so much as an entrepreneur, but as an artist, right? Like you did a lot of traveling when you were in college and you still continue to travel to kind of different places. So I'm curious how traveling has really affected your creativity and all of your, artistic kind of endeavors.
Yeah. So I've traveled as of this year. I've traveled to 34 countries. The bulk of it was through my second study abroad in London, where I was able to travel to like another country within the UK and Europe almost every weekend, and that was amazing. Traveling, the experience definitely opened my eyes to a lot of cultures, seeing a lot of different things, fashion and styles and like people's like behaviors. So I soak it all in. And I wouldn't say that it really directly influences my style or my ceramics, but it definitely has affected my openness a lot. So being open to so many different like looks, different styles, it's helped me grow in that sense, and just not having any kind of like reservations
Do
for
you
trying new things.
do you feel that when you traveled, and you're being inspired by the things around you, do you get a sense of the culture through the art, right? Let's say, I don't know, maybe you're in Europe, right? And maybe you're in an area that is a little bit more colorful, right? There's a lot of colors being used, right? Or maybe, let's say you're in Asia and the colors maybe tend to be more muted or something like that. Like I'm just making up like an example. Like, do you see that as like the art as kind of a reflection of the culture and like the manifestation of that?
Yeah, for those like specific cultures, definitely. Just like maybe like in Japan, like a lot of things are more minimalist, or and that translates to some of their arts, like very clean, fine lines. But they also have like wabi sabi, which is like more less perfect. So I definitely see like the architecture and the art translating through the culture.
Got it. And so you mentioned you traveled to like 34 different countries. And I'm curious, of the travel of the countries that you traveled to, like I'm sure it was over, a long period of time, maybe let's say over a 10 to 20-year period or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like how has traveling kind of changed when you were in like your 20s versus like kind of going into your 30s? Like, because I'm sure that the life experiences are different, but also your perspective on traveling has also kind of changed and shifted over time.
Oh, definitely. Like in my 20s, I was traveling on the cheap for everything, like cheap meals, cheap accommodations, hostels, just being there, being able to go to a new country for the experience of it. But in my 30s now, it's similar. I mean, I still like to travel like frugally, but also will splurge when, there's an occasion. So having a nice like villa in Bali is a splurge for me, or having at least one place that has a nice like hotel or Airbnb. Definitely love that experience as well.
Do you feel that
So yeah.
I was
Hmm.
gonna say, do you feel that the goals of when you were traveling in your 20s versus your 30s are kind of different? So let's say, for example, I think you mentioned like in Europe, right? You travel every weekend to a different
Hmm.
country. So I imagine that that's a lot, right? Like you're trying to knock off a bucket list for the most amount of time for the biggest bang for your buck, right? And talk to me a little bit about how that sort of maybe the goals between your 20s and 30s, in terms of travel goals, like have kind of shifted or changed.
It's kind of been the same because like in my 20s, my goal was to travel to, like, I did have a bucket list of like traveling to 30 countries by 30 years old, which I did. And just kind of having a taste of different cities. And now it's still very similar because I get bored very easily. I don't like staying in one city more than about 3 days. That's like my
Okay.
limit before I get bored. And then I like to travel to another place pretty quickly just to have a different experience. So I like to just kind of get a taste of everything, or different cultures and countries, and go back to it and maybe spend more time in a certain area when I can kind of reflect on it a little bit more.
I think for me, as someone who hasn't traveled to as many countries, and like the places that I've traveled to are primarily just in Asia and particularly like Tokyo, Japan, going, I think for a time I was going maybe every other year, for the most part. I thought of it as like, okay, what are the tourists, like I call them the tier one places, right? The places that you want to see these landmarks, kind of like landmark kind of things. And then
Mm.
like when you revisit, or when I revisit, it's like, okay, I'm there for very specific types of experiences. Like there's a cafe that I may want to check out. There's a food place that I want to check out. Maybe there's a museum, right, that I want to check out that's not necessarily like the most recommended tourist thing kind of like to go to. And so my thinking was just, how do I dig deeper, right, into a specific country and really kind of get to experience at a deeper level versus the taster kind of method.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I do. I do that too. But I still get bored pretty easily. Like, so we went to Sapa, which is the rural side, mountainside of North Vietnam, where they have a lot of Hmong villages, and we stayed there for about 4 days. I really enjoyed it. I think I could have done 2 days and travel on, but I do particularly like kind of going off the beaten path and going to things that are less touristy, more where the locals like, and asking the locals where they go. That's more my style because I don't know, the touristy areas are less exciting and less.
Sure.
Yeah, it's much more crowded, so
I
it's
feel
less
like
enjoyable.
cities are kind of very similar, right? Like a downtown pretty much kind of has relatively the same kind of stuff. Like, yeah, it'll be a little bit different, but you'll still have a shopping mall or coffee places or things like that. So the look and feel of a lot of metros, I feel like, are very similar.
Hmm. Yeah, I still want to check it out, like for a
Right.
day, but yeah.
Do you feel that there are, in your travels, right? You've traveled 34 countries. Are there any sort of underrated countries that you've traveled to? Like stuff that's not necessarily the top of people's lists, but you feel like
Hmm.
these would be really good experiences. Maybe they're a lot cheaper because they're not as in high demand. So I'm
Hmm.
just curious if there's any countries that you would sort of recommend to travelers that are thinking about the next destination but don't necessarily want kind of the standard typical tourist countries that they want to go to.
Oh yeah, man, so many. I really love Myanmar, which is used to be Burma, and being able to go there, it's just seeing this whole country that seems so preserved. They have thousands of temples that you can still, well, I'm not sure if you can still go and climb on them, but that's what I did. Being able to climb on the temples and see the sunrise and hot air balloons pass over, it was really incredible and so surreal and serene, and like it felt very like spiritual there. You felt that presence. I I think that it's definitely underrated. I don't know if that's on people's radars to go to, but and then Iceland. It used to be really popular, like
I
for a
feel like it
period of
was,
time.
yeah, it was like really popular from like 2014 to
Yeah,
2017, like that 3 year period. I feel like everyone was going to Iceland.
yeah, and I still love Iceland. I thought it was amazing. Every like you can go and like have a road trip in Iceland and experience all the seasons in one day. It's pretty amazing, and waterfalls, and it's beautiful. Super underrated. I would love to go back to Iceland, and then Czech Republic, Prague is amazing too. They have so many cool things. Like there's something called the Kunta Hora, like which is
Okay. What is it?
like
Yeah,
a
what is
skull.
Kuntahora?
It's like this chapel that has like a bunch of skulls, like skull art, like real
Okay.
human skull art, and it was really cool. It was really off the beaten path to get to also. Um, and then I don't know. There's just so many places. I went to the Philippines.
Okay.
I went to Coron, Palawan, which is an island. I think it's one of the less popular islands to go to, but that was amazing as well. You can like dive under like these shallow water like caves and get to the other side of the lagoon, and it felt super private.
Right.
So many places to go
Yeah.
to.
My girlfriend, she's Filipino, and she sends me
Mhm.
pictures. She sends me like TikToks and Instagram stories of like Palawan and Coron. I mean, she actually, the funny
Mhm.
thing is she focuses on those, and she actually doesn't
Mhm.
really send me stuff on about Cebu, which I feel like
Oh,
is like a
okay.
little bit more like well-known touristy kind of island
Yeah.
in the Philippines. So that's something to just kind of observed and notice.
Yeah. No. Corona is amazing.
But yeah, have you ever, so in your travels, right? Like, would you say it's a mix between traveling with other people, or, is some of it solo traveling as well? Because I feel like that also kind of informs what kind of experience that you're going to have.
Oh, well, I mean, I've only really solo traveled once, and that was to Fiji on my way to New Zealand,
Okay.
which was just for one day. And that was it was it was a good experience. I felt safe. I was just kind of following what the guides told me to go do and check out, and I had a lot of fun going by myself. But I realized also that it was kind of like lonesome. And if like I wanted photo, there was no one there to take photos
Right.
for me. And I definitely enjoy having a partner at least to go travel with. And I've done like group traveling too, and it's fun in its own way. But I think I definitely prefer traveling with just like my partner or a friend, like just like two people going and hanging out and exploring.
I would say you should try solo traveling at least once for obviously longer than a day. And this is coming from personal experience where pretty much in my early 20s, I didn't have a partner to go with, right? And so I feel like the social stigma was like you I know there are people who obviously do solo travel, they backpack and stuff like that, they stay at hostels. Uh, but I felt that one, like people, you either had to have a group of people that wanted to do the same things that you did, right? Or like that people that wanted to do similar activities. And then there was also like, hey, you have a significant other, you travel with your significant other. Didn't have a significant
Mm-hmm.
other for the longest period of time. So I didn't really want it to wait, right? I didn't want to wait. I didn't want to be beholden to like, hey, I
Mm-hmm.
need to have a significant other. I need to have a group of friends to travel. Every
Mm-hmm.
year you only get so many vacation days, and I felt like I probably should use them. So traveling alone, you're right, it can be kind of a lonely sort of experience, at least initially. But I think that's the point of I think staying in like hostels early on,
Mm-hmm.
and you find that a lot of people want to do the same things that you do. Like they're going to go to all the
Yeah.
tourist stuff and stuff like that. So you're actually really not that alone. But in the times that you are alone, it does really give a good introspective kind of feel. It's almost, you could almost say it's kind of spiritual because you're kind of alone in your
Mm-hmm.
own thoughts. And yeah, maybe getting photos are a little bit more difficult, or you have to kind of go up to people and ask like, hey, can you take my photo? But people are often used to that as well. But you'd be surprised how much you're kind of forced to make friends or to force to
Yeah.
socialize.
No, I definitely agree. I think, well, I mean, there's more times than that where I have just kind of experienced cities on my own. And I feel like I am able to be more outgoing and like initiate conversations and talk to new
Right.
people and strangers when I'm by myself than with somebody else.
For sure.
So that's fun.
100%. Yeah. That's something that where I've actually met a lot of my friends, right? Like new friends that I've traveled and met was not necessarily when traveling in groups, but traveling by myself and, forcing, basically being put in a situation or forcing myself into a situation where I have to talk, to someone to really get that social interaction. And then,
Hmm.
people that you meet in the hostels, like maybe they, are from a different country. And when you go visit that country, like I've met up with them as well. They've hosted me for dinners or, meetups and stuff like that. So they've become kind of like longtime friends. And that's something that you kind of expand your friend network as well.
Yeah, totally.
I do want to kind of talk about your involvement with becoming a certified yoga teacher for a little bit. Talk to me about what made you want to get into yoga, kind of as whether it's a spiritual kind of endeavor, a physical one as well. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, how I got into yoga isn't that exciting because I basically had a Groupon, a month-long Groupon that I paid for, and it was unlimited classes. So I just wanted to like utilize it as much as I could. So I would go every day, sometimes twice a day for that month, and then I ended up really getting super deep into yoga, the practice, and got my own membership and went every single day. Like I think this started in 2012. And quickly after, in 2014, I got my yoga certified teacher training. And I, at that point, I wanted more so to just deepen my practice, get better into my alignment and my forms, and also teach friends and others how to do yoga properly without injury. And I love the lifestyle as well, because through that training, you learn like the 8 limbs and kind of like the different ways of living as a yogi. So it opened my eyes to that part of it, like the mindfulness part. Um, but overall, like when I am really into something, I get so deep into it. So yoga was
Right.
such a huge part of my life for so long. And I got really addicted to learning how to get deeper into really advanced poses. And that was like more so like a goal for me every week to master a pose.
Okay.
And like it just was so fun and also stress relieving.
Yeah,
And
I was
I
I
got
was gonna
stronger.
ask,
Yeah.
right? Like, what were because you talked about like how you before you started becoming a teacher, right? Or before the teacher aspect of it, you talked about the wanting to come back every single day. Like, what was it about the the craft that made you want to come back and say like, I want to, you know, attend class again, especially from the novice stage, because I feel like that's like the most important phase where it's just like it's the easiest to fall off if you don't come back or you don't find that thing that keeps you wanting to come back. So I just want you to help me like flesh out what it was that made you kept coming back.
Yeah. I mean, it's different things. Like one was for the physical aspect, getting my exercise in, making me feel good and like I've done something that day. Um, and then two, it's just like being able to release so much tension, like emotional tension, anxiety, thoughts running through my mind, not being able to be present, not being able to like sit still and being so restless. Like yoga helped me really slow down and kind of calm myself towards the end of the day in a routine. And I thought that was, well, I mean, I still think that is like incredibly helpful and healing for me in so many ways. And just having like more friendships and connections through yoga, people who kind of feel similarly and are like minded. I met so many cool people, and that opened me up to like a larger network and space as well.
Got it. Do you feel that like because you were trying to because you felt all these great benefits, you know, over time, like what was the thing that made you want to become a teacher or certified yogi teacher specifically?
Well, I was contemplating between like thinking if I'd want to actually teach people or just deepening my practice.
Okay.
And I tried the teaching for a little bit, and I realized I didn't like teaching. It's just it's a lot of thinking and talking at the same time, and it is a little bit more stressful to teach. And overall, I enjoy teaching for a group of friends or just somebody personally, but not. I don't want to be on a schedule to teach people. Um, I have understood now that I just like it for myself. I do it for myself and my own practice and just like my own well being and wellness.
Got it. So when you were a teacher, right, or not teacher, when you were deepening the exploration of the craft, like what are the things that you sort of took away that maybe, you know, someone who's starting yoga for the first time, or even if they are just doing yoga in general, like what is maybe the philosophy that they may not be understanding or maybe not be taking away that they could, you know, by listening to this, really, you know, have a deeper appreciation for yoga other than just like the Instagram sort of like aspect of it, the physical side, because I feel that there's also, you know, an emotional, humanistic side to it as well.
A lot of it is listening to your body and also practicing patience, being present, and kind of just being able to like have something that is self care for yourself, that is something you can practice for you and honor yourself every day. That's some of the things that I took away from the yoga practice. And just being kind, like part of the philosophy of it is like to be kind, practice like kindness to yourself, others, not talk violently. um there's just so many ways of life that is like being a yoga and like student and instructor or yogi.
Makes sense.
It's
I
like,
think,
yeah,
go
it's
ahead.
kind of a way of life. Yeah, I was just saying that it's just kind of a way of life now.
Got it. I think that is a good sort of segue and transition to you mentioned, I think you might have said how, or inferred that, getting into yoga maybe was more of like a part-time thing, right? Kind of on the side. And I'm just curious, like, what was kind of the main kind of work that you were doing, leading up, to getting involved with yoga?
Well, my background is social work. So I'm still a medical social worker, but I've been doing it for over 10 years now, and particularly in the medical setting of hospice work and home health. So, like, really tough
Right.
emotional situations where, like, I'm working with people who are at end of life and supporting their families, or people in home health who are kind of coming home from hospitalization and learning how to be independent in rehab.
Like, I can imagine, just if that's like the main kind of work that you were doing, and then going into to yoga, right, and like deepening that craft there, it almost seemed like you were trying to find well, maybe you found balance, right? Like, there's obviously a lot of emotional, I would say work. Well, I guess you could say emotional presence, emotional work involved with, I mean, being, getting involved with social work, because it's a very human to human kind of industry. And then I can
Mm-hmm.
see how yoga sort of complements that, from like a release perspective, and like really kind of also getting in touch with yourself as well, after kind of like having such a stressful, potentially a really stressful kind of like day job.
Right. That kind of work, social work, especially what I did, is very heavy emotionally, and kind of being able to hold space for hundreds of people, hundreds to thousands of people who are like having a lot of like emotional like difficulties, challenges, like with family members themselves losing independence, mobility, control, and being there for them, being present. So I like to have that outlet, which was yoga and other things, to de stress myself, kind of ground myself, and reset, so that I don't carry that into my personal life.
I think it makes sense. Like, you got to have that balance between your work life and your social life, and just life outside of just work. So I can see how practicing something like yoga or pottery or things like that can really help shore up like an emotional. I don't want to say wall, but just like create a barrier, like a soft barrier where you're able to easily separate, and just kind of, I guess you could almost say, compartmentalize to a certain aspect, to a certain extent.
Right. Yeah. I definitely feel like I'm pretty good at compartmentalizing a lot of different things, and kind of like separating them. So after work, I kind of shut that mind off and do my other things.
So when you are making that transition, when you, or maybe you are or were making that transition from, let's say, social work from 9 to 5 or whatever, right, to something else, whether it's yoga or it's pottery, like, what is that sort of mental preparation, mental, emotional preparation that you kind of take, right, to go from one or the other? Because I imagine it's not just flip a switch, right? Like, there's kind of a warm up period or a decompression period or something like that, that really, helps you go from one to the other smoothly.
Um, I haven't really had that much of a challenge to transition from one job to the other, or one activity to the other. It's more so just having it scheduled for me,
Okay,
kind of like blocking it out, and then I'm just like, oh, okay, I am doing the next thing now. So that helps me switch pretty fast.
got it. So just having that kind of like, uh, the guardrails sort of in place. It's just like, maybe because maybe you have a set time to do something, it's saying, hey, like,
Hmm.
this is the time to shut off, right? Or that you're mentally already prepping a transition, right? Like,
Right.
not
I
necessarily
guess,
carrying that into
yeah.
the next thing.
I guess the schedule, the calendar blocking or the schedule blocking is that mental transition. So I'm kind of already prepared and already kind of like have it like set. So I
Right,
know
because I
what's going
imagine
on.
you wouldn't want to bring like maybe a tough day at work, right? A tough day of social work into like yoga or pottery, right? And maybe it affects potentially how you perform at those things if it's not transitioned, smoothly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I guess I have like entered a yoga session with a tough day at work, and like I might cry if there was something that was really resonating with me that the instructor might have said at the end. So it does help heal, like whatever I'm doing next, whatever
Mm,
my outlet is. Like if I need some emotional release, it definitely helps.
got it. I think it makes sense. It sounds like it seems like it's just like it's a smoother off ramp, right? As you kind of
Mm-hmm.
transition from one thing to the other. It's not to say that like it's a clear drop off, like, hey, I'm done and I'm not going to bring my, other self right into this new thing, but it's just like a slow ramp down, right? And maybe sometimes some days are heavier than others and you get a little bit more spillover on some days more
Right.
so than others.
But also having a support system of people to talk to about like those stressors, or like when I was having supervision while getting my license, sure, um, being able to decompress that way
Makes
and
sense.
have it be confidential, or a manager or coworkers to like decompress with.
What would you say, I guess, like most people now when they think about social work, and social work has kind of been in, more in the limelight, right? Especially with like, policing and like de-escalation and stuff like that. Just curious, like, what do kind of people typically misconceptualize about social work, right? That you would want to clear up, right? In terms of the everyday person and how they think about social work and the role of social workers.
Well, I feel like a lot of people don't know what social work means, but also are afraid of it and have the stigma that most social workers are there to like, take away maybe children or adults
Okay,
or
because that's what you see in
going to,
film, right?
yeah,
Oftentimes, like,
right.
oh, you're being okay, makes sense.
Right. But we're just advocates. We're advocates for, the different like departments we're in, or helping with kind of, there's so much in social work. It's super broad. There's like macro work, which is more policy, and then
Hmm.
they're like meso, which is like kind of in between. And there's direct work where you're like directly working with people with like in therapy or like patients. So it's so broad. I feel like most people don't understand how broad it is, and it's in a lot of industries and departments. But the misconception I get the most is like when I'm out to visit a patient or their family, they think I'm from the county, but I'm not. I'm
Okay,
actually from a private company, and I'm there to help them. There to help them with emotional support and resources, and like kind of be the liaison and part of the interdisciplinary team of the doctors and nurses and other people, physical therapists or whoever is on the team, to help support them and make sure that we're all on the same goal of helping the patient.
got it.
So they
So
think I'm the bad guy, but I'm actually there to help.
I was thinking like you're like basically the first point of contact, right? You're the access point for potential services that they might need, and you're, like you said, the liaison, like thinking about, okay, does this person potentially need this type of service, right? After you've
Mm-hmm.
collected all the data or talked to them and gotten their testimony about things that are happening in their lives, and you're having that back and forth, like you're talking to the doctors or the others, social services that I imagine that you're working with, and then you're also talking to the client or the patient, and I imagine there's probably two sides where they may not know everything, right? And especially
Yeah,
imagine on the patient side, it's like that education piece can, I imagine, be a really stressful kind of job, especially maybe if
right.
English is not their first language as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so there's so much re-education about the same things of my role to the people I work with, like the
Got it.
patients or their family members.
Cool. I know that you eventually moved into a private practice, and is it therapy, right? A private therapy practice.
Hmm.
So tell me a little bit more about the decision to move uh, into or to create your own private therapy practice.
Well, the goal when I was doing my grad school work as a social worker, the goal was always to get my license as an LCSW, which was kind of like drilled in us from the
What is an
professors.
LCSW? Like, what does it stand for?
It's a licensed clinical social worker,
Okay.
and that license allows me to have my own private practice where I can provide mental health therapy to others,
Got it.
psychosocial mental health therapy, and so be a therapist essentially.
Like, what is it like? What does it take to actually get that license? Like, what is the work involved? Because I think that background is really helpful to help really describe what it is actually like, what it is a social worker
Mm-hmm.
kind of provides, or like at least a
So
general template for that.
for my license LCSW, it's the route is pretty similar to an LMFT, which is a licensed marriage and family therapist.
Okay.
But for me, I had to get my MSW, which is the master's degree, which is like at least 2 years full time. And then, so I got that degree, and then I had to have hours logged in. And I don't remember the hours exactly. I think it's 3,600 hours
Okay.
of clinical experience that is signed off by a supervisor. So I had to see a supervisor that I had to pay out of pocket because my company didn't offer one every week for
Okay.
2 years worth. So, yeah, whatever that is. And so
Is
I had
that
to
what
get
was
through
that like an
all,
everyday kind of thing, right? Because you said 2 years worth. Was it like 5 days a week, 7 days a week, or just however? Like, what was the
it
concentration
was
of the work?
1 hour a week that I
1 hour.
had a
Okay.
supervisor provide me supervision. And after I completed all those requirements, I had to take 2 exams, I believe. I feel like it's been so long that I don't really remember it as well, but I believe it's 2 exams. One is a law and ethics exam, and the other is like a clinical exam to get the LCSW, licensed clinical social worker license. And it's actually it's very very rigorous, and it's very tough to get to that point. So I think I got it. So I graduated 2013 with my my MSWs, and got my license in 2017.
I feel like because there's so many requirements, like people actually don't understand how much work goes into it. Like the the line between being ethical, I feel like is also really important as well. Because I think maybe the common misconception is like it's just someone off the street. Like I could be a therapist and just give, you know, advice as a friend, right? And I think it seems like therapy, whatever discipline you choose, is much more than that. Like there's a deeper meaning to it. There's, the client, patient sort of relationship and things like that. There's, what is the right way to de-escalate or to
Right. Yeah.
approach, right,
So
a person.
yeah, I've had a lot of trainings and certifications on how to approach, different situations, like maybe like some crisis situations, or I've had a lot of grief and loss training from my work as a like hospice social worker. So I feel like I'm pretty well versed in that, and providing emotional support to family members, like just counseling, or just helping them reframe through cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, different thoughts patterns. So a lot of it is learning it on the job, but also having
Right.
a lot of trainings and certifications to get to the point of competency of being a therapist. So there is different frameworks for different licenses. And yeah, I like to work with kind of like a holistic approach.
I think the question that I have for you as a therapist, and not asking for solicited like advice from me, but actually more, how do therapists, like when they want to go through therapy, right? Like, do they usually go see another therapist, right? Is it like, it's not something where you, like, how much do you self
I think it
utilize the
cut out.
things?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I was going to ask, knowing that you have all this knowledge about therapy and whatever, specialization that you have, and if, how much do you utilize that for yourself when you need to, it's not really like seeing a therapist, right? Like you can't really see I mean, you can think about it yourself, but how often do, like, say, therapists go to other therapists to help resolve some of those problems, if that makes sense?
Oh, definitely. Like I have my own therapist, and I think most therapists are recommended to have their own therapist, or it's highly preferred. And if I have a therapist, I prefer them to have their own as well. So it's just another way to decompress and process things, and get yourself grounded again, reset, get yourself in check again, and not have like any of your own issues bleed into your therapy practice for your clients, because that wouldn't be helpful for them. It would be harmful. So being able to continually having your own self growth, being committed to having your own therapy is really important for me personally as a therapist. So so that there isn't any transference in a therapy session with a client.
Got it. Is it more like you want to make sure that you, like, I get the transference like part of it. Is it also to make sure that uh, you are, I guess, if you're trying to psychoanalyze your own, let's say, an issue that you're going through, right? Like having that third party, right, who doesn't necessarily know everything, right, that like you're personally going through, and being able to talk to someone as a third party, like I'm guessing you probably feel that that's something that can help reduce any bias like that you might have.
Right. Yeah, I think that's one of the most helpful parts of having a therapist is that they don't know, your circle. They don't know anybody. They're not related to like the issue. They're just there to listen and be able to hold that space.
Got it. So I know we've kind of went on a tangent a little bit, and I wanted to know a little bit more about the niche of your private practice, considering that you mentioned that there are a bunch of different specialities, and wanted to know like what it is that you focus on.
Oh, sure. So for me, my niche is working with or providing therapy to like primarily Asian American, like young adults, young professionals between the ages of 20 to 40 who are struggling with like some kind of life transition, maybe grief and loss, kind of going through difficulties with relationships, a partner, friends, family members, working through intergenerational trauma, being able to maybe build their confidence or wanting to build their confidence. Most of my clients have a lot of anxiety or work-life balance issues as well. A lot of people who seek me because I'm like Asian American myself,
Right.
and they like to have somebody similar to them. Um, that's what they tell me. So that is my ideal client. But at the same time, those are not all of my clients. I definitely open up and welcome clients of any ethnicity, any background, if they are a good fit if we're a good fit. And so I do a consultation call to make sure.
So you listed out, the wide range of I don't want to say problems, but more just issues, right? That people are, suffering internally, right? Or they need to, figure out how to resolve. Uh, what are the kind of the most common ones, right? I would say that, you often see that come to you, like on a kind of more repeated basis.
Um, there's so many, but a lot of like my clients have difficulties with like speaking to their partners, being able to open
Hmm.
up, being able to express how they feel. A lot of men have that difficulty or challenge. Also, a lot of women have that challenge, being able to be vulnerable. I see that a lot, or just a lot of anxiety regarding like maybe they're mind reading somebody else's thoughts when we can't do that, or they're kind of having a lot of like assumptions about things, which causes a lot of anxiety. So,
Can you
so
talk about a little bit
many.
more about like the mind reading aspect of it? Just because I know that it seems like that's something that's kind of a little bit more vague. Like, is it the expectation
Mm-hmm.
that someone should just know, right, that the other person wants a specific kind of thing, or wants them to take a specific type of action without verbally
Yeah, there's
communicating?
that. Yeah, there's some of that where maybe there's a couple and my client is like one of like half the couple, I guess, and they assume that their partner should know that they want some XYZ, but I have to remind them that their partners are not mind readers, or a person might be assuming a thought that like a friend might have about them, like, oh, he doesn't like me. That would be like a mind reading thought when we have no idea. So some of my, like, I guess some of my practice would be to encourage my clients to be open and vulnerable and let their friends or their partners know how they feel and have that direct conversation so that they can get through, maybe conflict and resume like a relationship still. So you can have conflict and also maintain your relationship in a healthy way.
So one
A
of the
lot of my
things,
clients, go
okay.
ahead.
Oh, I was going to say one of the things you mentioned, right? Like was that, you do specialize with the kind of the Asian American kind of experience, at least in terms of different types of problems, not exclusively, obviously. Like, how does that sort of play a role, right, in terms of the things that you are catering kind of your services towards, right? Or, paths to resolution between, I'm assuming couples or young adults.
Well, regarding the Asian American experience, a lot of my clients are second generation Americans, and their parents are immigrants. So they've come from like another country, and there's just so many cultural differences that they experience, or not understanding what their parents have gone through. Maybe their parents have not had things modeled for them, like emotional expression, and in turn they don't express their emotions, and that affects the client. So kind of being able to process and explore those feelings. Also, because of a lot of the Asian American hate crimes that went on during the pandemic, I had some clients come to me due to that, kind of processing the struggle and the grief going on during that time.
Right. So something like that, where like there's these external factors that they felt like, I'm assuming they didn't feel like they were in control, or something, it was, and a new external anxiety has like been thrust upon them, and that seemed to be very kind of unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
Like, would you say that for your clients, right? Like, what are the different ways that they can, like, basically think about how they can help resolve some of their own issues, like in terms of like expression, and like what are some like top tips, right, that you can give people just generally kind of across the board to help kind of like take that first step, right, towards sort of resolution for common items like this.
Sure. So I start off my clients with like kind of like a treatment plan, kind of having a goal that they want to reach. And so maybe one of the goals could be increasing communication with different relationships or partners that they have, and being more vulnerable. And then we break that down to short-term goals of how to get there. And an example would be maybe telling your partner that like how you feel like once a week or something along those lines. So having that practice as homework set into place.
Like, do you feel that in the Asian, well, okay, maybe because I'm a fourth generation Asian American, like there are things that, for example, like my mom told me I love you, right? She used to tell that to me, which is like kind of like the joke in, second gen Asian circles, like, oh, your parents never say they love you kind of thing, or they'll never say things like directly. And so
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's kind of been an interesting sort of experience, as I have a lot of second generation Asian friends, and the
Mm-hmm.
balance between the Americanization and Asian, and how like my parents express, right, stuff to me, right, like they spoke to me in English, like I never really learned a second language like growing up, and it was a very different kind of experience where maybe because my parents were more expressive, like I learned like how to better express or to maybe internalize it, but also to be able to have the capacity to express a need or a want or a desire, or to tell other people how I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. It sounds like they were able to model that for you, which a lot of people don't have.
But I think it's also because they also went through that same experience with their parents, right? Like what I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of second generation Asians like really go through.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of the stories that I hear from my mom in her relationship, like with her grandparents, right, or her parents, are very similar exactly to the ones that I think a lot of second generation Asians have. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she wishes her parents said, I love you, right? So it was one of those things from that trauma, right? She wanted
Yeah.
to change the way that she wished, she had kind of that kind of lifestyle and the way that she wished that
Yeah.
her parents sort of treated her, sort of thing. So
Well,
it's weird.
yeah.
It's like, because I don't live it, but I hear it, right? And I hear the
But
stories all the
yeah,
time.
that's pretty amazing because it sounded like your mom broke that cycle. So she's able to like be vulnerable and express that and model that behavior for you to see. And in turn, it sounds like you're able to also do that.
So the funny thing is, like, where she modeled that behavior from was TV, like American
Mm-hmm.
TV, because in the 60s and 70s, right? Like, there wasn't really this huge Asian pride movement, I would say. Like, Asians were generally still the minority. I mean, Asians are in America, like, generally a minority, but they didn't really have that kind of like speaking power, or like this Asian pride of like, I'm proud to be, Chinese or whatever Asian ethnicity that you were. So a lot of it was like wanting to be like I Love Lucy or like Grease, right? Or the kind of the
Mm-hmm.
classics that we sort of see now. But if like that was all you really saw on TV, right, then you kind of aspired to be that, or you aspired to have a lifestyle like that. Like, my mom loves the Brady Bunch, right? That's the kind of lifestyle that she wanted to have. Like, she didn't want to live in Chinatown necessarily. Like, I asked my mom, like, for example, like, how many of her friends does in her generation like live in Chinatown, aspire to live in Chinatown? She's like, none, right? They all wanted to get out. They wanted to move out, right? To have that better life. And I feel like that's also made, I might be extrapolating a little bit, but I feel like that's why, a lot of parents, right, also made those sacrifices to make sure that their kids had a better life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it sounds like your mom just wanted something different for herself and she kind of created her own path.
Yeah. Which obviously it was passed down to me, like, and my sister as well. Like, we did a lot of sports. We did all these things that she wasn't able to do. And I feel like that is also part of, not that I'm a parent, right? But I imagine that's how I would imagine parenthood, is like being able to do the things that you wish that you could have, right? Or that you think will be kind of beneficial, right? For your kid down the road, right? Just given whatever sort of circumstances you might have suffered or experienced, right, in your kind of lifetime.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's probably something to ask your mom to ask her directly.
Yeah. Oh, I'm pretty sure that's like the case, because me and my mom, we do talk about kind of like that stuff all the time. Like, we reflect upon like her experiences, and I talk
Mm.
about it. Like, these are what my second generation friends, Asian friends, are going through, and it overlaps. And I think that's the most interesting thing to see, at least from my perspective, is like not really living it, but hearing it. But I also hear it from two sides, almost like as a third party, in a sense.
Yeah, so
And
kind of secondhand experience.
yeah. I do want to transition a bit more towards pottery, which I think is probably what most people are most interested in. So I'm actually most curious, like, what made you really get into pottery, like as a hobby, first of all, and then a profession?
Yeah. Oh man. Well, I mean, I started pottery twice. One time, or the first time was in high school as an elective, and I hated it. Got a B in it. My
A B
instructor
is
said I
not bad, right?
it was
Like,
an art class. I felt like it was like a failure, and
you
being Asian felt like it
you
was
know
a
what's
failure.
so funny is, like, so I work with artists in my day job, and like, I was like, how do people grade art, right? And a lot of it is just like, because art is supposed to be the subjective thing. That's what, like, teachers, I would imagine teachers kind of tell you. before you actually get graded. It's your own self-expression, but it's often like, how often did you follow the brief, right, or the assignment, relative to what you're supposed to create? And so that's kind of my like interjection, I guess, like of how art quote unquote gets graded is how closely you follow the.
I followed the brief. She just said I wasn't trying hard enough, and I had a bad experience because of that. So I didn't really look back or wanted to pursue pottery after that elective. But then 10 years later, 2016, I was going through such a bad time in my life, such a rough patch after a breakup. My grandma had a massive stroke. I was on the verge of losing my job or getting laid off because of like they weren't doing well. And I had nowhere to live for a moment. So it was just like a shitty time in my life. And I wanted to get out of that like funk. And I decided to restart pottery and take a ceramics course on wheel throwing at a local community studio, and completely dove deep, just like I did with yoga, so deep that like I did it. Like I took that course, which became kind of like an open studio, like do your own practice, self-study, like for 5 years, I think.
It's a long time, 5 years.
I took it every single quarter for 5 years straight until like enrollment just got too difficult to like sign up. And
Like,
I also volunteered. Oh, go ahead.
so I was going to stop you there, and I was going to ask, like, in those 5 years, right? Like, because you were taking classes after classes after classes, like, what was that process like going through all those classes again? Because even though you did pottery in high school, like now doing it as an adult, right, with different kinds of experiences, and you have maybe some of the basics down, right? Talk to me a little bit about the process of going through all those classes and what it felt and meant to you.
Well, for me, it felt like it wasn't so much the like I love my instructor. He was so kind and patient, and if I had a question, he helped me, which I feel really grateful for. But for me, taking the classes was just for my own personal practice, kind of like making things I wanted to make instead of like a syllabus and like
Right.
syllabus agenda. So I don't work that way. I kind of like to free flow and do whatever I want in terms of my creativity and what I want to make. And he allowed us to do that. And that helped me a lot because I would do a project, maybe make it like chip and dip bowl, and I had a question about it. So he would come and ask or see how I can improve on it or help me with techniques. He was kind of just like there when I needed him. So that guidance. But for the most part, it was on my own and just practicing, having that time and space allotted at least once a week to practice. But then I got so deep into it, I was going to the studio like 4 times a week. I volunteered for them for free. Nice. In exchange for like open studio time, even more time to practice. So it was like my second home. I lived there. Like I had my own locker and it was great. And I just felt so at home there. And just got so deep into flow every time I was on the wheel. And the wheel, like making the actual pots, is still my favorite part of the process.
So I want to hold like that thought, like the flow part, we'll get to it in a little bit. But I guess one, it sounded like you had like your teacher, right, inspired confidence in you. And it was almost like your own sort of pottery therapist, right, to a certain degree. So that's something that one, I kind of noticed. And then two, it sounds like when you're going through this really difficult time in your life, right, that pottery and going to all the classes gave you that stability, right? Gave you almost like in a sense, like seemed like a sense of purpose, right? Just something to like a routine that you go through, but also to like release, right? Like those emotions.
Yeah. It was the only thing I looked forward to. The only thing. Like I wasn't looking forward to anything else really besides having as much time as I could in the studio.
Yeah, it sounds like that structure really helped, right? In terms of like, whatever you're going through at the time of your life, and then pottery, you knew that it was going to be the consistent thing that was always going to be there, and maybe there was I don't know, imagine in those classes, right? You're doing different kinds of tasks, you're activating different parts of your emotions, your brain, and like the physical aspect of the wheel, which I want to go back to, is like you talked about that flow state that
Oh, yes.
you
So,
experience.
yeah. Because my work was so heavy emotionally, there like pottery was kind of like my therapy for me, my self-care. It was a place where I just didn't have to think being on the wheel. It was just like almost just autopilot. Like I can throw 100 pots easy and not think about
Like,
it. And
okay, well,
it's
first, what is
yeah.
throwing 100 pots? Like, are you talking about literal pots, right? Like throwing it, right? Or like talk to me a little bit about
Oh,
what the
sorry.
throwing the pots actually mean in a pottery sense.
So okay, first that was an exaggeration. I don't throw 100 pots in one sitting. I can do about 25, and like a bag of clay. And
Okay.
that throwing a pot means to be on the wheel, like throwing a ball of clay down onto the wheel head while it's spinning. You kind of like create a form and
And
shape
that's
with your
one pot,
hands.
right? One ball of clay is one pot.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that's kind of just what I did for self care.
I guess what I'm curious about is the physical sensory aspect of it, right? Of pottery. Like you talked about the emotional side of it and how it was, there for you. But talk to me a little bit about when you're actually like the experience of putting your hands on the clay, like the water, right? And the texture of the clay and how that is potentially, I guess, like a self-healing aspect of pottery.
Well, I'm very hands-on, so I like making things with my hands. Being able to do ceramics, you are using your hands all the time, especially like on the wheel. You use your hands to make your forms and create the different shapes you want. And I think touch is definitely very healing. So the touch to clay, touch to mud, getting dirty. It's also a way to let go of like professionalism sometimes, like in being such a like a tight professional environment and just getting messy. So it's fun.
I was actually wondering, right, like if you could describe, like, because maybe there are people who haven't actually done any pottery, or maybe the extent of the pottery that people have done is for like a work group kind of team outing, right? Or, kind of barely just scratching the surface, like no pun intended. Like, talk to me about the sensory experience of, putting your hands on the wheel, right? Like, what does your body feel when you're actually
Oh,
working the clay, right? And the flow state, and I feel like that's part of the flow state, like as well, is the sensory aspect.
if you're new to throwing on the wheel for pottery, it's gonna feel like terrible. I think like you're gonna like not have stability in your body, or you can't center the clay. It takes a while to get comfortable with the clay before it starts to feel good and before you start to get into flow. So being able to set those expectations there and having the patience and like trusting the process, that practice does work. But the sensation of it, um, like, do you mean after being able to get into the state of flow?
I would say even just like touch, yeah, getting into that state of flow, right? And like touching it. Like, as for example, you're putting your hands on the clay, right? The wheel is turning, right? You feel the clay going against like your hand, right? And obviously you probably need some water on there as well. Like, you know, talk to me about like what do you feel like when you put it on there?
Oh, well, it's different for different bodies of clay as well. Sometimes it's gonna feel really nice and buttery smooth, like porcelain, or a really fine clay. But other times, like if there's a really groggy clay with a lot of like grog in it, which is like kind of like sand, I guess,
Okay. It's a little bit
it's
rougher.
gonna, yeah, rough clay, it's gonna hurt your hands. It's gonna like beat your hands up and make it raw sometimes. So there's definitely different sensations with different clay bodies, and it's really what is your preference.
Do you feel that the clay, based off the texture and stuff like that, has their own body of like personality, right? Like, is that something like how a lot of potters may sort of approach it, right? Where it's just like, oh, maybe
Mm-hmm.
I'm working with this groggy clay, like this one's gonna be a rough one, right? And there's a different kind of like expectation and preparation. that they might, put
Um,
themselves through for that?
that's also an interesting question because like for groggy clay, you have more structure with it. You can pull it like a lot taller. It has more like you can make more height usually. And then with porcelain clay, which is a very like it's like the purest form of clay,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very soft, very wobbly sometimes, very delicate. It really depends on the look you want. You can get it really thin, which is the appeal of porcelain. You can have it like really nice and thin and sometimes
Right.
translucent. Um, but it's also very finicky, so it's difficult to work with. I forgot the question. Sorry.
Oh, it was just more like the sensation, right, of it. Like you talked
Oh, yeah.
about, like it's finicky, right, for porcelain, and I imagine also that's why like baby plates, right, tend to be good candidates for porcelain because they can be on the plates can be on the thinner side. I imagine like at the ends and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, that's just kind of like was my initial thought. It was just that the clay and the materials and however you mix it, right, they have their own
Mm-hmm.
unique personalities, and it's almost like you're maybe it's not the right word, but almost anthropomorphizing it. Like I thought about it as like the clay is a kind of horse, right? Or it's just like this one is a really wild horse, right? Like it's gonna, maybe more advanced, right, to take care of. Others may have a different kind of personality to them. So I'm just curious
Oh,
if like
yeah.
potters really think about it not just like as here's some clay, it's rough, but like
Mm-hmm.
more in
Yeah,
a metaphoric kind of
I
way.
see. There is, yeah. So once you say it that way, I definitely use different clays for different looks that I want and for different like appeals. There's like a black clay that I love to use when I want to like feel more experimental and edgy and have that contrast of black and like colors or black and white. So it's more contrasted, more shocking to see. If I want to experiment with more like bright colors, I use a white clay or a porcelain clay so that it's like more fun, more colorful, more bright, and you get those deep, vivid colors. That that's personally what I enjoy using the most. And then if I want more structure, being able to throw taller, have more of like a brown earthiness to a look, then I will use a stoneware clay or a speckled clay, which often that's pretty like trendy, I think. So
Like
a lot of people use that.
do you feel that because we were talking about therapy and self-healing, especially in and kind of potentially how it ties into pottery. Like, do you feel that maybe you're having, let's just say you're having a rough day, or like there's a certain element of that physical clay experience just based off of kind of like different personalities that are just like, today is a black clay day because I really want, a certain type of feeling and I'll work with that, for now. Is like, do potters make decisions on kind of how they're feeling, right? And how they want to work with like a specific kind of clay for a physical kind of sensation or emotional kind of thing. Less so about like the actual um, physical or I guess like visual result, but just thinking
Mm-hmm.
almost kind of combining it more as like a self-healing method, right?
I see. For me, not so much. I experiment with different clays when I am in the mood to experiment, or when I get bored of using one
Okay,
clay for so long. Yeah, that's when I start to kind of have variations with my looks.
got it. One question, and to kind of transition a little bit, that I have a question about is, you know, why should people support their local potter? And the reason why I ask this question is because, oftentimes, pottery, in terms of, I imagine in terms of selling pottery or bespoke pieces, or even like big business kind of pieces, like pottery can have a wide range of costs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, some people are just like, here's a cup, right? This is whatever, $4. Maybe it's not the most bespoke piece, but like they're thinking maybe more about the functionality or how cheap it is versus like there are some people who may pay, I don't know, 40 USD, 80 USD, heck, it could even be like 200 or whatever for something, really nice and bespoke. So talk to me a little bit about, you know, why people should support kind of their local potters. Like what do you hope that people who purchase pottery kind of get out of it, get out of that experience and the product?
Well, it's like the appreciation for the amount of work that goes into making a ceramic piece. It's so much, and that it's like so much behind the scenes that you don't see. Like you can go to Target and buy a $4 mug, and that's manufactured. But if you buy something locally from a ceramic artist, they make it themselves with their own hands. They go through the different stages of firing. They glaze it. They like make the form. They do everything, and it's such a long process. I think that everybody like who is a ceramic artist, or most people, are underselling their work. Definitely,
Yeah.
it's worth way more than $40 for a mug, in my opinion. So I price my mugs like like my average range for my pieces are between like 90 to maybe 175 or something like that, like depending on what it is. But there is so much more behind the price and the value that is not seen. Like
I guess like
I
how
don't
do you
know.
get people
Yeah.
to recognize that? Because that seems to probably be the most difficult part of maybe art in general, right? Like what is how do people value it, right? How do you get someone to value it? Like I would say even a cup has more usefulness, right, than a painting, but people are willing to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for a painting that kind of just hangs on the wall, and obviously can have different kinds of value. But I'm curious how
Yeah.
kind of potters, like even within your industry, kind of talk about how do we get an everyday person to really understand like the level of love and care and the expressions that go with it, so that you
That,
can share that value.
yeah. That's a completely loaded question. That is a common question for all
Sure.
potters, and I can't answer that in depth, but only speak for myself.
Right.
I put into my pricing like my time, my energy, my experience, my years of experience, my uncommon techniques that I use, like maybe gold luster that I use, that is really expensive, and I use a lot of it. My own value, like the value that I place on myself for each piece, and maybe the uniqueness of it. They are all unique, but like, am I going to recreate something like this again? Will I be willing to or not? Um, all of that comes into play, and it's really based on the artist specifically, like personally, how they feel like they should price their piece. Like besides material costs,
Right.
it's so much more behind it.
Like, I think maybe what people don't understand is how many years of effort it takes, maybe to say, to make a straight line, right? Or to apply a certain type of technique that looks relatively simple in visually, but maybe they just don't understand like the years of expertise, like all the failed experiments, right? All the work that has
Mm-hmm.
been put into getting, I'm just using an example, that line or maybe the handle just right, so that when it fits in your hand or when you're holding it, there's a certain type of sensation that you get from
Mm-hmm.
it, depending obviously what angle you're looking at it, or how you're using it. So that's kind of like how I imagine, and what people don't really understand about the value of
I
art.
I think it's just really the artist having to explain it, having to explain how like long the process is, and letting their customers know that this is the work behind it.
I think that totally makes sense. And I think storytelling is a big aspect, I imagine, for a potter, right? Because the pieces that you guys make, or the pieces that potters make, are an expression of themselves to a certain degree. And so I think where it kind of comes from, right? Like what value, if you want to put values and emotions, right, into the pieces, I think that's something that like can really help sell what it is that makes that specific potter like super unique.
Right. Yeah. So for my followers, I try to um, like let them know about my process as much as I can, like how much work is put into each piece, and just be as open as I can with my own boundaries,
Right.
what things I don't feel ready sharing yet. So I hope they understand where, like, how much work I put into each piece.
One thing that I do want to ask and transition to is, we talked about traveling, we talked about being a yogi, talked about, opening up your own private practice, like how these kinds of different life experiences like influence your ceramic style and the way that you express yourself through your art and pottery.
Well, they do inspire me in different ways. It's not, I would say, just like all of those experiences, it's not like direct inspirations. Like I don't look at a landscape and I try to recreate it. That's not my style at all. Like my style is like from the energy that I hold on to, from an experience, from a travel experience, from like maybe Burning Man, holding on to that energy and being able to translate it and recreate how I felt into my work and into my art. So that for me is when I get into the flow state, when I get into like just intuition and creating something in my mind on a piece of pottery. And I think that I like to work like very fluidly, without a lot of structure and kind of almost like winging it, but with like some like idea in mind. So I have like somewhat of a concept, like kind of like the feel. I kind of go by feel, other than like rather than like direct, like like things.
Direct comp, yeah.
Yeah, like I don't go by directly trying to recreate the ocean or anything. That's not how I work with my art, but it's more of like the energy I feel in the moment.
So when people buy or look at your pieces, it's like almost like they're buying a piece of your mind and state of being,
Mm-hmm.
like at that point in time, because
Yeah, definitely.
that's what it kind of sounds like. And I'm curious if that's what kind of goes into like the naming of your products, right? Like how do you come up with the different names based off of like
So
the end product?
I'm not attached to the naming process at all. I even ask my followers to help me name pieces because that's not where my creativity lies. I'm not creative with that or description. So I get a lot of like help from them.
Okay.
But I see things as a whole, like as like more, yeah, an overview, and kind of see how I feel about it. And something might look more like a galaxy. That was not the intent, but it kind of
Sure.
looks like that. So I'll name the collection that. Or I had a really hard time naming this one collection, which ended up being Subi's ice cream, and it makes
Okay.
no sense. But it was how I felt. It was like fun and cute and looked melty like ice cream, and like
Or
I thought it
potentially the
was
way
really
that
cute.
you dress up Subi, right? Like it goes into
Yeah.
maybe all your fashion collection or for Subi or something like that too.
Yeah, and I mean, it was also kind of a tribute to her. Like, I'll name my collections as like probably that's the only one that was a tribute, but like in future collections, maybe something that was meaningful to me at some time.
Got it. I'm curious about the preparation phase when you're thinking about creating something. So not necessarily like what kind of materials you use and stuff like that, but more just like what kind of flow state, like mentally, not necessarily on the clay, like but thinking like okay, you want to come up with a different kind of concept. You talked about how you're feeling at that point in time. Is there a way that you kind of get into a routine, like where things are kind of predictable within a framework, right, to help produce a different kind of result or an expected result, some controlled
Um,
result?
and like when I'm experimenting with new work, is that what you mean? Like, kind
I
of.
think it's more like for example, do you make sure you get X amount of sleep, right? You wake up in the morning, right?
Hmm.
Like you do a routine, right, to get ready to actually either come up with a concept, to get ready to throw clay, right? Like what is that routine that actually you
Oh,
prepare for
I
before you even
see.
get to the wheel for your idea?
Um, Lately, I'm still learning my routine. So lately I've just been having like kind of general goals for the week and trying to complete them by the weekend. But along the way, just throughout, the past years, I've been writing down in notes like things I want to make in the future or want to experiment with. So I have a long list of things that I've been wanting to do. And when the time is right, when I feel like I'm like interested or feel like pumped to try to do one of those things, I'll do it off the list. And that's where I get kind of the prompt from, I guess.
Okay.
And that's where I'll kind of focus and I go back to past work and see how I can like make it better.
Like, talk to me about the focus aspect of it. Like, what is focus in a pottery sense or in a pottery point of view?
But what do you mean by focus in a
So you
pottery
talk
sense?
about like, is it when you're saying you want to go back into focus, right? Is it the focus on the wheel, right?
Oh,
Like when
oh no, no,
you're,
no. So I'll have like a piece that I have made in the past, like 5 years ago, and I'll
yeah,
go back to that same piece and see how I can evolve it to something that is what I am feeling like that would be how I'd want to make that similar piece today. So evolving it, kind of
okay. Like,
like advancing that
what's an
piece.
example of like evolving it? Like, let's say you have something in your
Um,
collection
I would
and,
say
like, are you thinking like, I think this could use more sparkles, right? Or do you want to
sure.
take like maybe, because I know it seems like based off of the work that you do, you specialize in small plates, or I don't know if you call them plates, but just flat pieces of pottery or smaller plates and mugs, right? Or, small cups and things like that. Is it like, hey, I want to take this thing and transform it into something else, right? Or like, what's the kind of like types of inspiration or that you're looking typically to make when you're evolving stuff?
Um, well, I mean, for an example, I've worked with black clay for a long time. Years ago, I've started working with black clay, and only recently, like a few months ago, I went back to it. And I looked back
Okay,
at my past work with black clay and was thinking about, oh, how can I make this better? So this year, I kind of added on to it, added more color instead of just using white, added more gold to make it like more like a modernized version of it or today's version.
got it. So sounds like you're thinking about where it was, and then
Mm-hmm.
how you sort of envision it. And is it based, when you say modernize it, right? Like, are you thinking about
Mm-hmm.
the current trends, right? Or is it like, how do you balance out that current trend aspect to the point where it's not like every other piece, but it also has
I
your
see.
own kind of unique spin when you talk about
Um,
modernizing something?
and yeah, I don't mean current trends. I try to even have blinders on current trends. I try to have my pieces be as timeless as they can be,
Okay.
but for that piece in particular, it was like more abstract paintings, that kind of look. And I just kind of made, by modernizing it, I mean like what my style would be today, kind of making it into what I would make today.
Got it. And that's a good segue actually into how your style has evolved, right? Since you started sort of pottery as, from the classes, right, to actually being, uh, doing it almost full time. So I'm curious how that style has transformed.
Oh, man, it's evolved so much, especially in the past like half year to like now it's changed incredibly a lot. But when I started, my potter name is Tiny Namaste Pottery, which was derived from my yoga practice. So I was doing a lot of yoga, like mantra dishes at the time, things that said namaste on it, or like yoga sayings. So that's definitely like evolved. I don't do that anymore. It's moved away to, manifest that shit dishes, which is kind of another way of life for me, which is like there's more meaning to it now.
Can you
Um
explain the manifest that shit like mantra? Like, where did that kind of
yeah.
come from? Like, how did you, no pun intended,
Like
manifest, right? Like that
it
saying.
just yeah, it just came from wanting to empower myself. So that was like for me. Like that dish was for me and now it's for everybody to have a piece of it. But that is like a way, like for me, manifest that shit means to make your dreams come true and make those little steps and like practices and making the space to let those like dreams happen. And manifesting that shit also takes a lot of work. It's not just like imagining something and hoping that it'll come true. It's like putting the work into it. And I try to instill that in my work and like let my followers know that's what I mean by it. Not something more woo, but that's how I interpret it. And it's more so like being able to verbalize and have intention with what you want to happen and like let it come into fruition through your work.
Do you like, does the phrase come from kind of like a specific type of experience or situation that you're going through? And I'm just curious how that origin of the manifest that shit, like, I think you kind of almost explained it in a therapist kind of perspective of like, taking something that you have as a dream and how do you put it into action. But I'm just curious if there was like a situation that kind of helped derive like that saying or way of
Kind of.
thinking.
I mean, I guess my vision of where I want to be in the future and where I want my ceramics to be in the future.
Okay, makes sense. I can see how it's like a super powerful phrase that, especially like if you're, purchasing something, right? Like from, if someone's purchasing like a piece of pottery from you, it's like they're getting a piece of what you're experiencing, what you're feeling, and your thought process, right? Of your work. It's like a self-expression form.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to actually kind of roll it back a little bit. I know we kind of skipped a little bit in terms of going straight into like the full-time pottery stuff, but I want to talk about and get your thoughts on like what made you want to take the leap from going from pottery as a hobby, right, to pottery as a full-time business.
So, I've always had like at least 2 jobs my entire career, or 3. And when I was doing like medical social work, that was my full-time job. Therapy as my private practice in the evenings as my part-time job, and ceramics evenings and weekends whenever else I had time as my 3rd job. And it kind of became too overwhelming. I didn't have enough time to do things I really wanted. Like I wanted to focus more on my ceramics. It was growing and thriving. And I was finding less reward and fulfillment from my full-time job. And it took up, the full day, 8 to
Right.
5 or 8. Yeah, whatever, 9 to 5.
You just get whatever's energy is like left over just into your pottery.
Right. It just became too exhausting to do all 3. And I had I have to let one go. And I've always wanted to just work for myself 100%, which was what my parents have done. And like kind of like instilled me to have that dream. And it's very unconventional to have it like, be a full-time ceramicist in an Asian, like coming from an Asian family and culture. So I kind of just had to figure out my own like path and pave my own way. So originally, I wanted to just do my private practice full time, but then I realized I really love ceramics and I need way more time to develop glazes, learn how to do glaze chemistry, learn how to do 3D printing and like experiment more. I can't do that if I have another full-time job.
So I kind of want to stop you there.
Yeah.
And I want to ask, did you tell your parents, like, what was it like when you told your parents, I'm going to be a full-time ceramicist?
Okay. So my mom was on board. I think she was pretty supportive when I told her. She was like, "Oh, okay, do whatever you want."
Okay.
But my dad, oh man, he is like, it was just last week actually. I told him, and because I thought he already knew, but he was asking me, "Oh, is your commute to work like okay?" And I was like, I quit." And then, and then he was like, "What?" And then I had to explain to him that I was doing ceramics full time and also my private practice part time. And he looked so disappointed. And that was really hard to get past. It was like nothing I can do, whatever, however successful I am is never going to be enough for him. So that's part of like, him and his own thing.
Do you think do you think it's partially because, so it's funny because I was watching this show, I think it was a YouTube, it was a Google talk It was with Bowen Yang and Yul Kwan. So Bowen Yang's from, he's on SNL, right? An actor. And Yul Kwan is a winner on Survivor season 3, a Korean guy. He works at Korean American that works at Google, and he was saying that even though he won Survivor, right, $1 million, whatever, his parents were like, "So what?" Right? Like they weren't proud or impressed. But it wasn't until he was written up in a local Korean newspaper that his parents could brag to other
I
people. It's like,
see.
look, my son is a winner, right? And what I learned
Yeah, that's
about
sad.
that was social validation. Like I could just imagine,
Yeah.
what is your dad going to say to his other friends? Because in Asian culture, it tends to be more collectivist, generally speaking. And so I imagine the social status of being able to tell like other people
Yeah.
about it, like
Um,
there's probably a
okay,
concern
so
from that end.
I mean, as I was explaining that to him, what I was doing, and I told him I'm working for myself. I have 2 businesses, and I'm like fully self-employed. And then he was like, "Oh, okay," and he was like, "You're working for yourself. That's good." So I have to
Okay,
like get past his disapproval like throughout my life, and that was just like the latest one.
got it. Okay. But yeah, I just wanted to get your take on like what your parents felt, just because I'm sure that's probably something that probably most people are curious about, and especially as Asians going into the arts, right? Like that's always something that I feel that is maybe it's like a rite of passage almost, where like it's a question that always gets asked, right? And it's always gets asked because some of the stereotypes are true, right? Like in terms of parents just being worried that like, is my son or daughter, are they going to make it, right? Are they going to be able to take care of themselves, kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's definitely that fear. They are always like I feel like a lot of immigrant parents, Asian American parent or Asian parents were in survival mode for so long. A
Yeah.
lot of were refugees. A lot, had a lot to get lived through to get to America. So of course they're worried and concerned about their children's like future and security. Um, so
Like
I forgot what the question.
I think it's also understanding the opportunity. Like they may not necessarily understand the opportunity, right? Like,
Yeah.
if your whole life, maybe you grew up you immigrated here, maybe English, right, wasn't your first language. Um, Historically, Asian Americans didn't have access to broader parts of America, right? And from a societal sort of perspective. So maybe just even the imagination, right, of what someone could be is just not there. It's just not a picture painted in their mind, and especially as you know that our parents' generation is becoming older, right? Like they didn't have the internet, right? They didn't have all these opportunities to see what was possible, other than, like you were saying, being in survival mode.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think they're less open-minded about other career paths
Like
than
other
what
than
they're
being
used to.
a doctor or a lawyer, or
Right.
something else that is easily understandable for them, right? Because even my mom, right, in the 60s, it was the same thing, right? So
Hmm.
I think going back to just looking at it from a third party like sort of perspective, that's the thing that's so interesting, is just like it's like history repeating itself over again, like that. In the 60s, they wanted they wish my mom was a doctor or lawyer, or like a doctor or lawyer. In 2000s, right, like same kind of thing, right? So I think that's the part that's kind of like interesting. Like you would think it
I
changed with the
see.
times, but sometimes it doesn't.
I think it is changing now. It's starting to
I
change.
would I would say, I was talking with my friend recently, and I was saying that this is probably the last generation where someone, like if we become parents, we're going to say like you have to be a lawyer or a doctor. Like that age is over now. One, because you have like YouTube, you have the internet, you have more platforms to actually be a legitimate. You have more representation in roles that necessarily weren't accessible to Asian Americans. Like you have Simu
Hmm.
Liu, right? You have Michelle Yeoh, even though for Michelle Yeoh, it took god awful long time for her to get her just due, especially with everything everywhere all at once. But you can actually see success in different industries that maybe, I don't know, 50 years ago, that just wasn't the case.
Yeah, definitely. And I think
So I feel like people are going to be more open to it just because there's more role models.
yeah, there's definitely more of that shift, that mental shift of being able to accept, unconventional career paths as being successful and okay. And I think that's what I have been able to do to a lot of people who follow me, and that's what they tell me. They tell me that they look up to me because I inspire them to also pursue something they want to do in the arts, which I think is amazing. Being able to be a person who can represent that for them, like that, it's achievable.
Yeah, I definitely have seen more people, even Asian Americans, in the arts, and I think that representation is really encouraging. And it's an area in our growth as an Asian American society that I wish that should be continue to be championed, right? Because I think about how so many people were forced down a certain path, maybe by their parents, right? And maybe they feel like it's too late, right? Maybe they've gone to the path where it's like they were forced to be dentists or doctors, and they don't enjoy it anymore. And all I hope is that that they can find a way to be their inner child, or things that I guess a sense of innocence, or the dreams that they had before things were forced down kind of upon them,
Mm-hmm.
and to really enjoy. I think that's part of being the American dream, is that idea of possibilities and opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know I went on a tangent, but I want to go back to the pottery business, a little bit, and talk to me about like your experiences, like growing a pottery business. Specifically, there's the artistic side of pottery, and obviously making, the art and the creative expressions. But then there's also the business side, which is maybe not so much artistic, right? And like you talk about things like accounting or taxes and things like that. Like, talk to me about balancing those, right? Two opposite ends of the
Mm-hmm.
spectrum of the business side of pottery
Oh
and the
man, I
art.
just learn as I go. I learn as I go. I was doing pop up markets for at least 5 years before just transitioning fully to online sales on my website. So I had that practice in person markets, meeting customers in person, selling to them. Also, like
Well, I
my
guess I guess
experience.
I was
Uh-huh.
curious about what made you want to do pop-up pottery, like almost like yeah, why did you want to do pop-up pottery versus going eventually to, like, why not start just direct to consumer online? Like,
Well, I did both. I had an Etsy, like before my Shopify website today, I had an Etsy and like there was like just no like traffic. So I did pop-up markets because people just come directly to you. They're bigger events usually, and I did really well on them at them. And so that's why I did them. I did well at them.
okay.
And yeah, and so I had that experience with like working with customers, but even before that, being able to being a social worker for my companies before, I had a lot of like direct work with people where it felt like customer service a lot of the time, and kind of just being able to like know how to talk to people.
I was
So
actually
there was
curious
that. Mm-hmm.
about, like, when you're doing the pop-up, like what were the benefits of doing, like, highlighting your ceramics in a pop-up sort of environment? Like, what are the kind of takeaways that you got and learned from doing that?
Um, Mostly it was just fun. It was like enjoyable. I got to meet people in person and see their like initial reactions and like feedback in person. Like, I don't really see like my customers now, they're all over the world. I don't meet them, but I do miss that localness, the community, people who appreciate my work and know me locally. That was really fun. And meeting other people around me, like the other booth mates I had or other makers, and just building my network of like makers.
Like, I guess, what made you, because you talked about eventually transitioning to almost purely being online, like all your sales are
Mm-hmm.
online worldwide. Like, what was the thing that kind of made you, I guess maybe temporarily stop, right? Maybe selling your pottery or advertising your pottery at pop-ups, or maybe at a local level, like in person.
It just made no sense anymore to do it in person. It would just like in person. It worked for me during that time, but then once like my business grew and a lot more people found me, I would have a sale online and everything would sell out. So I'd have nothing to show for if I had like a pop-up scheduled. So it
Got it.
just made no more sense. Yeah.
So it sounds like it was like a resource constraint. Like you're only one person, right? And you're trying to make as much as you can as one person. So
Right.
like trying to
And yeah.
save inventory just for that, that seems like it was really difficult.
Right. And also just having it sold online, like once I released the collections in that day, it was a lot easier than being up at like a market for 8 hours and breaking down my tent and like bringing everything back. And it was less labor.
Okay, I think that makes sense. Like you basically, sounds like you basically use the pop-up, right, to get initial feedback on your stuff, right? Almost like as a proof of concept. You did something that was more unscalable, like, but now online it's a lot easier to, I'm sure, manage like inventory and stuff like that, the amount of, product that you
Yeah,
need
it
and
was
stuff like
just
that.
very organic and kind of just starting from grassroots locally and being able to scale up.
What would you, I guess, as you transitioned away from the pop up, because that's obviously a part of your growth story as a business, as Tiny
Mm-hmm.
Namaste Pottery. What were the other sort of vehicles for growth, right? Like I think you have an Instagram account as well, and like was that a pivotal role in growing your awareness and growing kind of people to your Shopify or Etsy site?
Totally. Like that's where I grew. And I can almost pinpoint the moment that I put in the intention that I wanted to scale my work. And I had this vision of where I wanted to be. And it was just so exciting. It was last year around my birthday. And you know this story because we hung out and I visited you. And we went to a
Mhm.
local Oakland ceramicist
Yeah,
warehouse or
Sarah
her.
Kirsten's warehouse is
Yes.
only a couple blocks away from my place.
Yeah. So her studio, her warehouse, it was just so amazing to like witness, and it was it was kind of like a dream of mine to have something like that.
Okay.
But I wasn't ready yet, so I put in the intention that I wanted to scale my work, and it just kind of happened. And I that like that desire was so strong. I felt like it did manifest through my own personal work and my steps to get there. But like having that realization that this is what I want to do.
Like, do
Really,
you think it's also
yeah.
because I remember as we walked into the studio or her studio, Sarah Kirsten's studio, it was like seeing a warehouse full of pottery, right? And just seeing
Hmm.
all the different tools that were, someone was using. And I remember her story, like she was talking about it, she was saying like, she started off as a single potter or solo, I guess potter entrepreneur, and that like she also had to learn stuff from scratch, like all the marketing. She admits like
Yeah.
learning on the fly,
Yeah.
like she might
Yeah.
not know what she's doing, but it was almost like this acceptance of like this is just part of the lifestyle. And
Hmm.
yeah, that's something that I remember like was really, I see the parallels a little bit, and I didn't know how impactful it was going to be for you like at that time, but I think for me living in West Oakland, there's a lot of warehouses and stuff like that, and
Hmm.
I personally love the reutilization of that space for the arts.
Hmm. Yeah.
It convinced me to buy more pottery, and to support local patrons, especially
Mm.
in areas where they really do appreciate kind of local support.
Yeah, definitely. No, it was such a like transformative feeling for me. I had such a like inner breakthrough that I wanted to like make reality. There was a piece that I had in mind that I had just made, and I had the thought, okay, this is my new work. This is going to be a new era for me. This look is going to be me from now on. And then I kind of scrapped my like past work completely. So I restarted anew and a new direction, and then suddenly everything grew really fast for me on on social media, on Instagram. And yeah, like it was just insane. I couldn't believe it. I started at 4,000 followers around maybe October or November-ish to 2021, and today I have close to, I
It's
think,
like
approaching
57.
55,000. Yeah,
I think it's
I don't know,
57.
55.
I checked earlier, obviously.
Okay.
Yeah.
I Yeah, so approaching at that rate. So it hasn't even been a year yet. But I felt like that was a really fast growth for me, and it was very organic. I've never had any ads.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really me putting out my new work and my new vision, and people seem to be receptive of it and like it.
I think one of the things that you do really well is, especially on the stories and reels aspect, right? Like you always have a ton of content about posting the work, right? Like you're showing the
Mm-hmm.
work, you're showing part of what you were saying is you want to show people that how much work it goes into it, how much skill goes into it. Obviously without revealing, everything, but I think it allows people a closer view of what you do, right? In a
Yeah,
more organic way.
yeah. I think people get to know me a lot. I started to open up a lot on my Instagram, not even that long ago, like a few months ago, and like I love interacting with my customers, my followers, and they're just like a community for me now, and it's so fun to talk to them and engage with them. And I love it when they talk to me about Subi. Sometimes it's even more exciting than hearing about my ceramics. And like,
Right.
yeah, it's been a huge support system that I've grown, and it's just insane.
It's kind of funny
Yeah.
because we were, how I was talking to you about and asking the question about how do potters make themselves more available, right? Make themselves more human. How do they tell their stories? And it sounds like this is your way of doing it, right? To let people know that behind the art, there is a person, there's skill involved, right? There's experiences, there's love, care, etc. Right? So by having this direct conversation with the consumer, it's really allowed for better storytelling and better understanding and appreciation of what goes on in your work. And maybe that's the reason why that maybe people continue to come back to buy different kinds of pieces from you.
I think, yeah, it's that, and I also think that they see me as somebody real, like a
Yeah,
real
a
normal
real
person
person. Yeah.
behind the screen, yeah, and get to know me and know my flaws, know my mistakes that I have in my like process sometimes, just not really filtering. Really, I try not to filter anything if I can help it, and just being myself and authentic.
Yeah, I think that's what social media platforms really allow people to do, and that's like one of the core key strengths of having those stories and experiences be accessible to a wide range of people.
Yeah.
So I'm actually curious, like, have you ever thought about setting up a TikTok or a Pinterest? Like, has that ever crossed
Oh,
your mind,
okay.
like at all?
So I do have a TikTok, but I lost like the information to log in, and I maybe have one or two TikToks for my pot. Like it's Tiny Namaste Pottery, and I can't log in, so I don't know what to do about that.
Okay.
And I don't really want to make a different user handle, so I'm still trying to figure out how to
You could
log
always
into
add
that.
underscores, or you can always add underscore official or something like that. There's different ways you can kind of get around it a little bit.
Yeah, it's not on my priority list, so
Okay.
that's for some other time.
Okay. And what about, let's say, Pinterest? Because I know, like, because Pinterest, it's very visual. There's a lot of people that put different pieces of art. I'm just curious if that's something that you've also potentially thought about or explored for another place to showcase all of your
I
pottery?
have never thought about using Pinterest, and I don't think I will. It's just not. It's not my vibe.
Not your vibe? Okay, I respect
Yeah.
that. Uh, Talk to me a little bit about the milestones that you've achieved in your business. Like you've talked about how you started at, you know, basically 0 to almost 60K, right? In terms of follower and growth. I'm sure not only just in your social media following, but also in, your sales and the things that the amount of orders around the world, right? Talk to me about like, when you felt like the key milestones were that helped you either inspired you to move on to the next stage or make your vision, of what you want to build as, Tiny Namaste Pottery.
Um, like it's hard to say because like I didn't really have any set milestones. Of course I wanted to grow my following, and like I'm okay with whatever I'm at. So if I was okay with 30K, and I'm happy with 50K, and like if it gets to more, that'd be great. But that was never really like a huge goal that I had to achieve. It just happened. It just happened. But like I guess income wise, that was a huge milestone. Being able to match or do better than my previous job in terms of income, I was able to do. And that really helped me have the confidence to go full time. And that was really, really huge for me. And still also like trying to scale up, kind of figuring out like what I want to do next, acquiring more equipment, reinvesting into my business, just different milestones. Like the dream would be to have a gas kiln, and have employees. That is the goal.
Okay, so I was basically asking, uh, what was that experience like when you realized that you could actually go full time, right? Like, talk to me about the emotions and the feelings that you were kind of going through. What was going through your mind at that point in time when you were ready to make that
I
leap?
mean, of course, it was amazing. It felt like I made it. It felt like this is possible. It felt like I can actually have a career doing this and be able to support myself and my family. And it was very emotional. I think I had a lot of fear that I couldn't do it, and I put a lot of pressure on myself before shop updates. But then every time I like had a shop update, like my customers pulled through for me, and oh, I'm getting emotional now because like it means so much to me.
I mean, I can imagine it's an emotional experience because of the people who have probably supported you along the way and the work and time that you've put in. And just thinking about, coming from where you started, right, with pottery from high school, right, and to going to those classes and restarting it again, and then actually doing it as a full profession. That is like a full progression, right? That is like an entire
Mm-hmm.
journey, going from, you know, having initially the confidence, right, not having the confidence in it to actually doing it as a profession. So I can,
Yeah, like just reflecting back on when I restarted pottery, it was such a bad time in my life. To being able to stick with it for several years to where I am now, and seeing how much growth and a future potential I'll have is just really amazing for me to realize and live through. So being able to manifest it, and but putting in the work for it, it's been a very emotional like journey.
yeah, I definitely can, can sense that. And to kind of like build off of that, you've talked about ambitions for what's next in the stage of growth for your pottery business. And, I was actually looking at two other stores, that, not stores, there's just other businesses that are actually based in West Oakland. One is, Sarah Kirsten, and another one was called Love House. And so these are local potters. And one of the things that I was looking at, was, you know, I'm pretty sure they probably use, they do stuff that's handmade, right? And then they also probably, I think there was something that I remember Sarah was talking about where they have molds and stuff like that. Like, talk to me about, right now you're one person, right? There's only a limited
Mm-hmm.
amount of things that you can do handmade for every single item, right? Like, to take that, next level to the business, like, I just imagine it's so hard to do everything just handmade,
Yeah.
right? And so I guess, like, what is the kind of vision that you're anticipating when you eventually may have to do less handmade stuff? Not to say that isn't going to be important, but like eventually to
Mm-hmm.
help make more products so that people can actually enjoy, the work and the art that like you're doing that still has that love kind of infused in it, but just at a bigger scale.
Yeah. So at this point, I plan to make things handmade
Right.
on my own as long as I can because I'm enjoying it still, and I can do it at my. I still have the capacity to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But in the future, and I don't know when that will be. Eventually, I'll have to scale up and have more employees who can help me. Probably do slip casting molds.
What
I
are
think that's what
Yeah?
Sarah did.
What
I'm
are
not sure.
slip casting molds?
It's like a mold that you make of like the original pot, and it's made out of plaster, and you put wet clay into it, and it makes like a replica of the cup.
Okay.
So you don't have to actually make it on the wheel. It's like made through a mold,
Mm-hmm.
and they're uniform. So that is something that is teachable to employees and others. And a lot of people who scale in ceramics end up doing that because it's also less work on your body.
Okay.
And at the point when I feel like I can't do it physically anymore, that's when I'll try to start slip casting. But
Okay.
at the same time, I'm already practicing how to slip cast just for experimentation, not because I can't throw. Like, I don't have the capacity to throw.
Like, talk to me a little bit about, because you mentioned how sometimes your body, from what it sounds like, as you get older, can't take as many reps of doing like handmade stuff because in terms of just quantity. So talk to me about
Mm-hmm.
like the transition that you see a lot of potters do as they're older. Like, was it more they just do less in quantity and that's it, right? And like how your body kind of changes as you get older and the capacity to do more or less pottery.
I don't know what other potters do. Maybe some start to hand build, which is like less work on the wheel, or maybe they like transition to sculptures. Maybe they do the slip casting, or hire other people to do like their work, and they do more design. So I'm not really sure what other
Okay.
people do. I guess it's just their preference.
Like,
But
I'm curious, like what degrades,
yeah.
right? Like what, like you mentioned how like, is it just the body gets tired, or is it like the
Oh,
muscles, right? Like
um,
you're just not as clean as you were before in terms of
well,
small. Okay.
carpal tunnel is very real. The for potters,
Okay.
you can definitely get that, or wrist injuries, or other injuries, I guess. So there's just the wear on your body. It's it takes a lot on your body.
Okay. Is there like, are there things where it's just like, if it's a lot of like wear on your body, is it a lot of potters have to make sure that they do, physical therapy to a certain degree, that they actually have to, I don't know, work out, right? Like they have to strengthen certain muscles or let them recover. Like, is that part of like a potter's routine as they get older, since it does start to take a more physical wear and tear on their body?
Yeah, I have no idea what people do, but for me, I definitely limit myself to throwing one bag of clay, which is 25 pounds or less, a day, and no more than like 2 or 3 bags a week, so that I'm not overusing my wrist muscles. I do also have a masseuse who helps me with like massages, and yoga definitely also helps with like strengthening and like stretching out.
It almost sounds like that's an underinvested, potentially an underinvested part of running a yoga business, is how do you take care of your body, right? So that you're able to be proficient at the wheel. And I imagine like rest periods are also really important. And like you mentioned, like knowing your daily limit. It's almost like a work yoga, not yoga, like pottery almost a workout, right? Like you have to kind of know
Totally.
your
Yeah.
limit. Like maybe you can have a PR, right? But you also have to probably eat well. You have to take care of your body, reinvest that money into
Hmm.
your health.
Yeah, yeah. So I try to not throw on the wheel more than like 2 days in a row, or otherwise I do feel the tiredness in my body. I like to prepare myself with like breakfast and just make sure that I'm good for the day before I start working. But also listen to my body. If I'm not feeling like it's a good day to throw because like I'm messing up too much,
Mm-hmm.
like if I mess up more than like twice, then I just stop completely because it's just like I don't want to be thrown off and make more mistakes.
Is I'm just out of curiosity. I know hydration is really important, but if like let's say you're doing extended periods of time on the wheel, right? Like how important is the type of food you eat or how often you hydrate, right? In terms of just maintaining that focus, right? I'm just curious about a little bit more about the preparation like phase.
Um, I never really thought of that. I just kind of do things normally. I've never really been affected by the food I eat unless it's something like super like heavy or oily. But I try to keep things like light and healthy in the morning, and then I feel pretty good and energized.
Okay,
And water intake, I just drink water as I normally do.
got it. Okay, yeah, I just wasn't sure if it was just like I think food has an important part in terms of daily activity. And maybe if there was something where like you weren't hydrated enough, like you start to mess up, right? Because like your mind might be focused, but your body might not be for whatever reason. So it was just more thinking about it from like a physical
Oh,
aspect
I
relative to
see.
food.
For me, it's sleep. So if I don't get enough sleep or well enough sleep, I'm not gonna function well on the wheel.
Got it. Okay. I think that makes sense. Like that's where the focus, I think, really comes into play and
Hmm.
the flow state. Otherwise, imagine if you don't get enough sleep, you're gonna kind of be a little bit off the game, off your, I guess, like you're gonna be a little bit off more often than
Hmm.
not.
Yeah, you definitely have to take care of yourself in any kind of career path.
Got it. So I know recently you went to a convention for pottery. I believe it's called the National Council on Education for the Ceramic Arts. Like I'm pretty sure most people haven't really gone to a pottery convention. Like talk to me about what goes on at a pottery convention and what kind of experience that you took away from it and brought back to your own practice.
Oh man, and Sika was amazing. I went this year because it was in Sacramento, which is like in our state of California, and it kind of bounces alternatively east and west coast or something like that every year. So it was close by, and I went and took that opportunity. And I it's like 3 or 4 or 5 day convention. And I didn't really have a lot of expectations. I just thought that I would go to a lot of like presentations and lectures and meet some ceramicists that I looked up to, and all that did happen. Um, the biggest thing I took away was being able to, besides meeting people I looked up to or recognized, going to the lectures and being able to ask questions directly to the experts on glaze formulation or clay bodies
Like
or
I guess what
um,
defines an expert in the pottery world?
uh, I don't know. Maybe it's um, self titles. I'm not sure,
Okay.
but like um, people who are professors or researchers, I guess.
Okay. So
I don't know
you're
what
saying
would be
like these are
considered an
people who
expert.
do like chemical science, right? At I don't know, UCLA, right? They talk about different compounds and I guess for whatever reason it relates back to pottery. Or are we talking about like here's someone who's done, I don't know, XYZ, these types of accomplishments and I'm guessing there's a national pottery sort of association that sort of governs
I think
everything.
I would say a lot of the experts, I would define them as people who are like have a lot of experience and are well versed and well known for their craft in particular. If it's like glaze chemistry and research, or clay bodies, or something else in particular, or a certain type of like niche that they do. So being able to ask those ask questions to them directly while they're on a panel was pretty cool. And just understanding more history behind the works of specific artists and their own lectures. Um, that was awesome. Another cool experience I had was like people actually recognizing my work
Oh,
or
nice.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the convention, like there was a cup sale where like anybody could donate their like ceramic cup, and one day like people would just go line up and buy them, and it's for a donation thing. And some people were able to recognize my work, or yeah, or I recently posted a similar cup that I gave to the cup sale to a Facebook pottery group, and somebody commented that they recognized my pot at the cup sale, and I was
Oh,
like, oh wow,
that's
that's cool.
awesome.
Yeah, so the recognition of like my style was pretty cool to see, and also being able to meet artists that like I looked up to, and finding out that they also admire my work and doing a trade. That was another cool experience. Just meeting people that I follow and
Like actually
becoming like
seeing
friends
them
with
in the
them.
flesh, and especially during this like time of the
Yeah,
pandemic, like being able to talk about and exchange experiences. Because I'm sure it's different. Maybe in, I don't know, maybe the Southern California scene versus just like the pottery. Like everyone's from around the U.S. or maybe the world is at this specific convention and probably brings different
yeah.
perspectives.
Yeah, no, it was just cool seeing them in person, IRL versus the internet.
Got it.
So that was amazing.
Cool. I think one thing that I was really interested in was, you know, pottery has been around for thousands of years, right? Like you look in the history books, like there's, the technology for making uh, pottery has evolved over time, but there's still obviously, I imagine, some basic elements like you need, rock or some sort of clay and water or some sort of, material. But I'm curious how, technology has kind of changed pottery in
Hmm.
both the sense that, like, what are the ways that maybe you're thinking about automating certain pottery processes without sacrificing the humanistic like art of, making it handcrafted.
Hmm. Can you reframe that question?
Yeah. So let's say, for example, you're cutting out a bunch of tiles, right? Like, and you're doing
Hmm.
that by hand. Like, is that like clay tiles or something for whatever project that you're working on? Like, is there a way where it's just like, hey, I put these into a machine, right? And basically it makes these clay
Oh,
tiles like
yes.
for me, right? Where like maybe that's not the fun part of the pottery experience, the fun
Yes.
part being on the wheel. Like we've talked about slip casting, right? As a way of like a form of automation so that way
Hmm.
like you can balance the art aspect of it, like the humanistic side of it
Hmm.
versus, you know, technology helping potters, right, get rid of like the more tedious
Yeah,
parts.
totally. Technology for ceramics has definitely been improved a lot. And I think even in just the recent years, it has expanded so much into like 3D modeling, prints for different pieces, like a mug or something, and then making a silicone cast to a plaster cast. And then you have that mold. And that has been huge and kind of revolutionary in the past few years. And 3D printing clay, like clay work, that's like another thing that people are still researching. I feel like there's limitations to that though, because they all kind of look very similar,
Sure.
but there is that too. And then in terms of like maybe factories or like warehouses where they have people manufacture like molds. I don't really know what kind of machines they use, but there's definitely that like machine or the process that makes it easier. Like at Sarah's place, she definitely had some of those some of that equipment that made it a lot easier to make plates or bowls or whatever she had. So there is that. I think there's definitely improvement needed for a lot of the technology for making work, but right now, I think we're at a good place.
Got it. Like, what would you say actually is the most tedious part of the ceramics pottery making experience? Is it like preparing clay, or like, I don't know, maybe not so ideating,
Yes.
but like I'm sure there's things that potters don't really want to do, but they know they have to do it and probably would love to just spend time being artists versus,
Mm-hmm.
pure preparation,
Yeah.
handmade preparation of stuff.
Um, well, that also depends on the artist. Some people like throwing on the wheel. Some people prefer glazing. Some people prefer for trimming. So it depends on what each person likes
Got it.
in terms of the process. But yeah, I mean, there is like trimming for me. I hate trimming. Trimming
What is
sucks. I
trimming?
wish that could be. Trimming is like shaving down clay to make it more even and like level, or just like having a foot on the bottom of your bowl or cup or something like that. Just shaving off clay. And like like recently I've been making I made 200 tiles
Right.
recently this week, which is like I hated it. I wish there was a easier way, which would be like slip casting the tiles, which also is another process that I don't like to do, which is the whole process of making like a plaster mold and slip casting. I mean, there's a lot of work that is not that like enjoyable and fun, but you
Right.
got to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, I was just curious, like, because no one really talks about the tedious stuff about pottery making. Like, I think most people just see the end result, but I'm always just curious, like, what are the things that people have to grind through that just aren't always seen.
Yeah, it's like just part of it, part of the process, and I've accepted it.
Makes sense. I do want to transition to your first Burning Man experience. I've never been to Burning
Oh
Man,
yeah.
but
Mm-hmm.
everyone that I know has obviously has really enjoyed it, and it almost seems like it's a very uh, artistic experience that people go to be inspired by other people who
Yeah.
have really wide and creative imaginations. So, like, talk to me how you
Mm-hmm.
got into what made you want to commit to going to Burning Man, and like what your initial
Yeah.
thoughts were.
Well, I've heard about Burning Man for a long, long time, like probably early college. I've heard about it and I wanted to go, but I just had no friends to go with, so I never went. And then when I met Colin, all he talked about was Burning Man since the first day we met. And he went in 2019 and always said he wanted to take me. And so that's what happened. That's how I got into it, because
Okay.
he was into it. And of course, I love like the art. And I've been to a similar event before called Lightning in the Bottle, and it kind of gave me like a sense of what Burning Man might be.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of had the same like way of life and mindset, like the people who went. But it was so short. It was like a weekend, and you're not that far from comfort. But like in Burning Man, you're in the desert, you're in the heat, you're like, you've got to build everything. You've got to build your camp. You've got to like be self-sufficient, self-reliant,
I feel like
be a part.
it's
Yeah.
such a maker's dream, right? Like to be able
Yeah.
to like start something from scratch and then build it up yourself. It's all within whatever you imagine or design. Like, so I just
Mm-hmm.
feel like it's a very imaginative. It really extracts
It
the
was,
imagination of a lot of people, the human ingenuity and
yeah.
creativity.
Just seeing everyone's creations, all the sculptures on the playa, the desert, it was amazing. And the scale of everything, the hugeness of the platforms and like art pieces that you can climb on, and like there were like three-tiered, second-tiered. Even the art cars were so like elaborate and huge sometimes, with like fire blowing and like different levels, like a second tier level or higher, and towers that you can climb on. Everything was so incredible and very like super eye-opening. I had an incredible experience, but I didn't come into Burning Man like being excited because I was going to be in a part of a group with like over 50 people with nobody I knew except Colin, my husband. And I wasn't excited about that at all because I personally am not like a group like person. Like I don't do well in groups. I'm very introverted and like to like keep to myself. And throughout my entire life, I felt outcasted, kind of felt like rejected, not really a part of anything, not feeling like I belonged. And that has carried into my adulthood, kind of just being a loner and kind of like being by myself.
You really had to put a lot of
ceramics,
trust into Colin, because like
yeah.
without your husband Colin, right? Like you probably might have not gone, right? And it's just like the whole it hinges a lot on that.
I would not have gone by myself with knowing no one at all. Like I wouldn't do that. I don't think I'd have the comfort to do that. But so just feeling rejected my whole life. I would do things by myself, like ceramics. For me, it's very individual, or yoga. That's very individual. Like I don't have to like be in a group in particular with people. So coming into the camp that we had, and everyone's like great, but I still had that same resurfacing feeling of like being an outsider, not being accepted, like feeling like people weren't welcoming, people didn't like me, like having like a really bad time the first day because of all those like negative emotions and thoughts, and even crying alone because I felt like I didn't belong, or that like, I just felt like I was an outsider.
What was that turning point, I guess, that really made it enjoyable and like an eye-opening experience? If you mentioned like you were feeling you had a kind of a the first impression was more of a negative approach, and so I'm just curious how that flipped that switch.
It was slow. Well, I mean, like it felt like a really long day, and I had those like feelings for the whole day. But then the next day, I was able to connect with more people, and also like as like a camp, we went on the art car, and I was Colin took me to the roof of the car, the top tier, so we can like watch the view going into the playa, which is like where the art is, and the events are, and the music. And it was just so overwhelming for me. It was so beautiful, deeply overwhelming. It felt like I felt so a part of the group. Suddenly I felt like included. It felt like we were a family. It felt like I had something to contribute, and I felt like I finally not in particularly belonged to that group only, but in general, in like different groups in my life, I felt like, I am a part of I am a part of groups, and I can contribute something. And I was never rejected. I was rejecting others somehow, subconsciously, which didn't allow me to open up. And I finally gave myself the permission to be accepted by everybody else. So it definitely shifted my mindset a lot and made me feel more comfortable with self-acceptance of just being me, no matter how different I felt like I was.
I think the most interesting thing that in hearing your story, thinking about the parallels, is when you were talking about how you saw Sarah Kirsten's ceramic studio, right? A vision of what could be. It kind of painted a picture of like, wow, maybe like it expanded your horizons, right, to a certain degree. And so going to Burning Man, right, and going through this kind of experience, but also like seeing the grandeur, right, of all the art, right, but also going through that experience with the people, it helped paint a vision. I feel like it sounds like it helped paint a vision of possibilities and what could be, right? And it seems like those are things that like are really impactful in your life, is when a vision can get painted, kind of like it comes in front of you and it just opens the horizons in different forms.
I mean, not only that, it opened up my heart a lot, opened up like my heart to others, like thinking about things less so selfishly as, what can I get out of something? Like how something can affect me, how people can help me. And like that shifted to feeling like, how can I help others? How can I contribute? How can I be a part of this greater thing? Like picking up trash that isn't even mine, being able to help like take it on a shift, cooking or cleaning, being able to give gifting to others. It was just like a whole new way of living that I wasn't, well, I knew about, but I never lived before
Right. So it sounds
in
like
this capacity.
it was
Yeah.
almost like you got to experience obviously community, but what does community actually mean? Like there's a service element like to community, right? Where you felt that person to person kind of interaction, almost like in a constrained period, not constrained period of time, but under a certain circumstances where it's just like you couldn't escape, right? Like you're here at Burning Man,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it sounded like it was just
Yeah.
either a choice of like, you could be sad all day, or it's like you can try to enjoy it. And so that constraint of just not being able to escape, right? Like, and just being surrounded by
Mm-hmm.
people, I think it seems like that really helped in terms of
I
the acceptance and opening up a little
yeah,
bit.
I think that was definitely a huge part of it because you are stuck in the desert for 7 days with your camp.
Yeah.
And like I want to enjoy the rest of the time and not be all negative. So definitely I had to like get out of my comfort zone and really shift that mindset on my own.
I'm curious how the whole Burning Man experience, like when you came back from it, like how did it affect your art thought process, and particularly around your ceramics? Like what kind of you said it opened you up emotionally, and how did that like affect your like I know you're probably still processing it and going through it, but was there anything that you noticed when you were back on the wheel and preparing
Um,
to throw again?
Well, like it was like well, like I brought back a lot of the energy that I was feeling and like kind of that high from being at Burning Man. But during one of the nights going out at Burning Man, I had another kind of mindset shift where I felt like um, my inner dialogue was saying to my customers or people like my followers that I hope you like my art. I hope you like my work. But then that suddenly shifted to like more of an empowering inner dialogue that said, thank you for trusting me to make like, sick ass art.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you. And it made me kind of realize, okay, they trust me. They are like buying my work. They are following me. They are engaging and talking to me. And it must mean that I'm doing something that they are resonating with or they love or they like and that means something to them. So I need to reframe it in a way where I am trusting myself to, provide that for them. So it definitely gave me that shift as well. Instead of having that insecurity of hoping that they like my work, but just like trusting myself so much that I want to thank everyone for trusting me.
It sounds like it's an empowerment of like it's a service meant like a service oriented shift, right? But more in an empowerment kind of way. Like I'm here, not necessarily I'm here to serve my clients, but it's like I'm serving them in a kind of an experience, right? That that they're thankful, like that I know that they're appreciative of. And there's a little bit. It sounds like there's almost a little bit of empathy, right? That you had for your followers, right, or the people that do buy your ceramics, and really try to think about how they felt, or potentially how they feel about why they support your art.
Right. No, I think that it's mutual, like thanking them for like trusting me and my vision and my work and my artistry and them appreciating it. So it's more than just buying like any pot. It's like having that connection with them.
They're buying a piece of your mind, where you're at in your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the story of who you are as a person, and not only just as a ceramicist.
Yeah, they're like buying a part of my evolution. It's like a limited collection every single time.
I mean, you could just make a new collection that's called, Christine 2022, 2022 or something like that, or the summer collection, or you can season it as well.
Yeah, I don't know. That's too much thinking for me right now.
Okay. I want to start to wrap things up a little bit. I'm curious to get your opinion on any advice that you have for young people.
And yeah, definitely. I think a great thing for young people to have is a mentor of any type that they are interested in wanting to pursue in terms of like life experiences, career wise, anything. Like having a mentor, that support system is immensely impactful, and learning through somebody else's experience so that you don't have similar failures, or you can like try to prevent them at least, I think can help a lot for young people.
And I guess like as a slight follow-up, like is a mentor is someone that you were actively seeking out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or how does one really find a mentor?
I personally did not have a mentor. So I kind of sought that through different people for different things, just kind of like snippets throughout my life. But just, yeah, so being able to have somebody that you trust and can give you guidance, I think is really important.
I think for me, in terms of mentorship, like in terms of seeking out mentors, it's not like saying I'm going to point to you and I'm saying you're a mentor, right? Kind of thing. It's more of just really talking to different people with different types of experiences. And also, I would say even in different age groups, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people who I look up to, maybe not in my 20, like people who are in my age range, but maybe people who are parents, right, or grandparents, right, and like really getting a diverse set of perspectives on kind of things to watch out for, right, or things that they've gone through. And I think those can that I think is the start. It can be potentially also being a starting point of where you can find mentors, is just talking to different people in different age groups.
Yeah, I definitely think just having a conversation with strangers or anybody or people you look up to, any conversation can be impactful to your life.
So, as part of the wrap up, I have a set of lightning round questions. So, these are questions that I came up on the spot with.
Mm-hmm.
And the first question is, what are the top 3 countries you would go to for specifically for pottery purposes, like to upgrade or learn a new skill? Like, is there a specific type of culture or countries, I guess, pottery style that you would want to learn and then eventually adapt, right, into your
Yeah.
own practice?
Well, I'd love to go to Japan again, but not for touristy things or like leisure. It's more, I would love to like learn how to do more or have the experience of wood firing in Japan, which is very well known for that. And then Bali, which I just went to, but like they have this they have Gaia Ceramics in Bali Ubud, which they have retreats or kind of like 2 week long like workshops and kind of like short residencies where you
Mm-hmm.
can learn different styles and maybe even Australia. And no
Okay.
particular reason why, but there seems to be a lot of ceramicists in Australia. So maybe they've got something I don't know about, but that'd be kind of
Right.
cool
Like
too.
for the Australian ones, right? Is it a specific style that kind of attracts like you about the pottery scene in Australia?
Maybe it's more so their clays. They have different clays there that we don't have.
Right. I mean, it is primarily a desert, so I would imagine the type of earth is quite
Hmm.
different.
So, like, materials used are different in different areas of the world. So, I'd like to try different like materials.
Got it. More of an industry inside question. What are the top 3 potters that you would like to learn from? Like, if you could go spend, I don't know, a month, right, with a potter, right, of your choosing, who are the kind of the luminaries that you look up to that you would want to learn stuff from?
Well, okay. So there's this, I think he's a professor. I met him. His name's Brian Hopkins, and he's really cool and nice. But he just seems like he has so much knowledge. And he was on the panel for one of the NCEGA lectures. And I'd love to learn from him because he does this like slip casting, modular like piece where you can interchange different pieces of like a multi like piece slip cast.
Okay.
Anyway, I'd love to learn more of that. And then there is, I mean, Seth Rogen. He's like a new potter.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
he's a
Talk to me about that a little bit.
celebrity potter. I think he just started it a few years ago, but his work is really interesting. It's very psychedelic, and I'd love to learn more of that.
Okay.
He's cool.
Not surprising for Seth Rogen type of pottery.
Yeah, and then I'd love to oh man, this artist that I also met at NCK, and I don't remember her name. I think it's Erica, but she makes incredible, beautiful, like fox-like, almost rat-looking sculptures that are large scale, and they just look incredible. I can't describe it, but she also incorporates like the surrounding effects to it. So she had it in a pool, like a moat almost.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get the experience like of more than just the sculpture. It's like the surrounding experience. So I'd love to learn more
Right. It's
of
like
that.
it's like presenting it at an art museum,
Mm-hmm.
almost like kind of thing, or yeah, an art museum.
Yeah, I'd love to learn more fine art, definitely.
If you want to learn more about Christine's pottery works, you can find more in the description below. But Christine, also, you can feel free to let us know where you would want people to find your work.
Sure. Mostly I'm just on Instagram at TinyNamastePottery. And if you want to look at my website, it is TinyNamastePottery.com.
Awesome. Yeah, Christine, thanks for coming on and totally appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.